Hello there. So, um, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. I kind of wish I was available for Mark's stream last night. We were at Estuary. Um, there's the Tucker interview, um, which is roiling um, Twitter. He did an interview with the guy from Margaret Maid, who Uh, how do I put this? I don't think he identifies as an anti Semite, although his views are obviously animated by probably an unconscious and probably a religiously based um, animus towards Jews, which became really obvious when he started talking about what a psychopath um, Winston Churchill apparently was, um, because he was a Zionist, which was hilarious. Um, Tucker glows. So this is actually, I have to say, when um, oh, Cal says Cooper is a Marcionite Gnostic. Right, yeah. Um, I can definitely believe he's a Marcionite. That makes a lot of sense. Um, we're and frankly, Mark's stream from yesterday hit upon a lot of important things, but Abigail Schreier pointed out, well, Tucker must understand. Um, oh, Laura, it would be great if you wanted to jump on. I would love to talk to you, Laura, about this stuff. Um, the he Abigail Schreier pointed out that Tucker must understand what having somebody like the I guess his name is Daryl Cooper um, on his show would mean for the election. Like, you're gonna do this. How about you do it after the election? How about you don't do it before the election, right? Um, it's quite I would say um, disappointing, but at the same time, when you realize what's going on, just generally, I mean, the indictment that was released today against Lauren Chen's company, Tenet Media, which I mean, releasing this close to the releasing this indictment this close to the election is itself um, like election interference. Um, and then I've only listened to the first 20 minutes of Brett Weinstein on on Rogan. Um, the political landscape is is seriously changing. I am happy to see that Nate Silver's forecast um, is uh, is looking more and more like um, Trump is going to win. I believe RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, um, Brett Weinstein, um, and the Lex Friedman interview with Donald Trump. Um, I'll say something that people will find inflammatory, but I think is just plain true. Um, there are no intelligent, informed people who are voting, um, even third party. Eric Weinstein on Chris Williamson, yes. One of the most important, like, the potosphere is actually moving. Um, it is quite clear that eh, I think that's a distraction, Garth. Um, it's quite clear that 2024 is not 2020. There used to be, Yon God says, no intelligent person can vote against Trump. That is correct. It's really going to be a make or break moment. Fun times ahead. Um, yeah. Oh, okay. Glad to hear, Garth. You were joking. Um, there are intelligent, ignorant people who are going to be voting for Kamala Harris. That is an unfortunate byproduct of the propaganda regime that we live under. I actually wanted to speak to Mark Parker. I would much rather have a dialogue here, because we're grasping our way through really uncharted territories, right? Um, Yet, what should be abundantly clear to anybody who is actually believes in democracy. Laura can't come on. Laura would be a great person to talk to. I have great respect for Laura's capacity to see things in a clear-eyed manner. Yeah, I mean, doing that interview right now. The fact is, I mean, I anybody can go back and listen to the Felix podcast. It was, I believe, the third or fourth episode of my Post Platonic um, podcast on Spotify. You can listen to much of it for free, even if you don't have a Felix is the third episode. Um, you can listen to much of it even if you don't have a, a Spotify subscription for free. But if you want to listen to the full thing with the music, you need to have a subscription or pause it whenever a song plays and go and listen to the music on YouTube or something else. Um, yeah. So honestly, Cooper right now is a distraction. Um, I think it is very, very important that we are coming to a point where there are no longer people who were living during World War II. And part of the difficulty in the Jewish community of trying to contextualize World War II like it should be was partially just the raw emotion of it around people who had lived through it, um, and are survivors, right? Um, like that. I mean, certainly when I was growing up, survivors were commonplace. I mean, it was only 40 years after the war. Um, but now, pretty much it's moving out of living memory, and we have to confront this worship of Hitler as an anti god, as the orienting principle of our society, being we're not like Hitler, which is one of the founding premises of boomerality. Yet at the same time, I have to say, the more I find out about this Cooper guy, the more I wonder. Like, he used to be a he used to work for the military. I think he may have insinuated himself into the discussion for a moment like this to discredit Tucker, the right, and by extension, Donald Trump. Right. And like Cal says, secular Judaism has reform and conservative to a large extent, the Holocaust has become their religion. And in Orthodox Judaism, this is not as much of a case, but there are people who, even Orthodox Jews who, Rahman al-Islam, commemorate Yom HaShoah, right? And Rav Ovadia Yosef was one of the few voices in the chief rabbinate willing to stand against this desecration of halacha, of having Holocaust Remembrance Day. Hey Matthew, have fun at the wedding. I might be driving up to Santa Barbara on Saturday, maybe, or Sunday. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Cooper glows. I'll say that much. But we have to seriously consider what we are my frustration with Mark Parker's engagement with the Jordan Peterson sphere, or this lower corner, or whatever you want to call it, is that unfortunately I thought we were more prepared, and this has happened to me over and over again. I have imagined over and over again that we as a community have the institutional knowledge, have the communal knowledge to be able to address the mistakes of boom morality, which I think Michael Sartori, he named a spirit, and he named it well. Yeah, so there's a lot to talk about. I think they're all interrelated. I would be very interested in someone who wants to actually discuss this, jumping on. Okay, I'll play this clip I got from Mark's thing. It's just so hilarious. Stop. Okay. Just a second, folks. Just 1 second. So this clip was just way too perfect.
Anyway, I don't know what he's talking about advice. This advice thing perplexes me.
Here, I'll play it at normal speed.
Anyway, I don't know what he's talking about advice. This advice thing perplexes me. Anyway, I don't know what he's talking about advice.
Like
This advice thing perplexes me.
This advice thing perplexes him. I was dying there, just dying. You join in?
Yeah, sure.
We have special guest star. He won't leave my house. I'm going to have to kick him out soon. I might be picking up Matthew on Saturday night, so you might have to be gone by Sunday.
Okay.
We'll see.
Mhm.
I might take you to go pick up Matthew with me, and you might have to duke it out to see who gets to come back from San Diego.
Yeah. You know, you don't have to go.
Yeah, we could just leave Matthew up there. Okay. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm the quintessential Zoomer. I get to speak for all the Zoomers here. I don't know. I've hardly ever seen a boomer. You know, like met them in real life. Just doesn't happen. Like, where'd they all go? What happened to them?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how quintessentially boomerish Mark is. Yeah, like most boomers are not that boomerish, but last night at Estuary, Bill was being incredibly boomerish.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we do encounter boomers.
Oh yeah, Bill. Yeah, but like, you know, growing up, I hardly ever met him.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so like Mark's gonna be very confused if he watches this. Like, what do you mean? Like, so there is an internet concept of boomers, which is a stereotype,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously does not apply to any single person because stereotypes never do. Yet encompasses certain aspects of many individuals so that you can name the spirit, right? And have it just like manifest sometimes, right, in individual people. And yeah, Mark often, like, this just kills me. Like, how do you, like,
Anyway, I don't know what he's talking about advice. This advice thing perplexes me.
like, so what, and I don't actually know President Foxman. I barely recognize the name. I've heard of it. I went and looked at some of the videos. I haven't really watched any of his videos. I know barely anything about him. Apparently he's more the Neil Daedalus / McMo type, who are also people I haven't had a lot of interaction with. So President Foxman in his video is talking about how, like, the intergenerational handoff from one generation to the other, and he's trying to explain the resentment. And I have to say, especially on a stream about Hitler and Churchill, I am completely opposed to concentration camps for boomers. I would be like, no, we cannot put boomers in concentration camps. No, we cannot put them in re-education camps. Boomers can, in fact, be redeemed. They can, in fact, repent eventually, even though they have a lot of difficulty understanding this concept of repentance. And they certainly don't want to repent of their sins because they understand their sins to be virtues, which is the whole point of repentance, right? Is people who think that something is a virtue and help them understand that it is in fact a vice, right? Cal says, "Oh, I thought that's what retirement communities were for." I mean, certain people do have this idea that we'll be rid of the boomers when they die. First of all, they are not dying nearly as quickly as you might think. Second, I don't think that's a very messianic / Christian way of looking at it. Like it, there is this concept of a generation that must die in the desert, right? Within Judaism, but I am hoping that this generation doesn't need to die in the desert. That they can also be redeemed. Although I have to say, like, it's difficult imagining boomers being redeemed. Anyway, so back to President Foxman, what he was saying was that the problem is there isn't enough of a generational handoff. And Mark wasn't understanding it. He was thinking of it all in terms of physical wealth, like generationally giving money from generation to generation. Trey, he was wearing a gi. He must have just left Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I'm guessing.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, he's learning martial arts to defend me from Andrew's parents. But he's back. Hello.
Hello,
Why are you wearing a gi?
BJJ, giving hot BJJs, if you know what I mean.
Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like I said.
Amen. Amen.
Like I said. So, did you hear something you wanted to talk about, or you're just jumping on for fun?
I'm just jumping on for fun.
Because I thought, I mean, I kind of was thinking of you when I said there are no intelligent people who are not supporting Trump. Well, no intelligent, informed people who are not supporting Trump this election.
Look, Obama's gonna win. You can just cry and whine as much as possible. It's not.
That's not what Nate Silver is predicting right now.
Yeah, but polls lie sometimes.
Yes, polls do lie sometimes in favor of the Democrats. I wonder why that always is, that the polls are always wrong in one direction. Why do you think that might be, Trey? Why are the polls never wrong in the other direction?
I'm just saying, like, you know, one person was ranting about the other side being really old, and now that person is the oldest side. So it's kind of just like poetic. Like, I just don't feel like.
Well, that was part of what we were talking about. Like the blogosphere, the podosphere has, thank God, really shifted. I mean, I was listening to Joe Rogan and Brett Weinstein, and it really seems like, even like when Brett Weinstein and Joe Rogan are starting to recognize it's impossible for an intelligent person to vote for Kamala. Like, I think I think this episode of Joe Rogan is definitely going to shift the needle and the polls even more so than it has been before.
You know how you say, like, I don't understand how you watch all these dumb people? I really do not understand how you watch all these dumb people. Like, Joe Rogan and Brett Weinstein, these are the people you think are going to actually change an election? Jeez. If it's coming down to that, like, you know, maybe we should just get, like, you know, a totalitarian state, you know?
Okay, Mr. Sank-Uger.
Yeah, I mean, Trey, no, it really does come down to, and it is a question of who do you think is an intelligent person and who do you think is dumb? I was just doing my homework, right? And one of my things was the technical definition of insight, right? Like who actually has insight? And one of the main reasons that that Eric Weinstein, not Brett Weinstein, was back on Chris Williamson was because he said Biden's not going to be the candidate. Back in February, I also said my prediction is that Biden is not going to be the candidate.
Shank also said that.
No, he said Biden shouldn't be the candidate. That's a little different. But yeah, I mean, the fact, I mean, there is a real question of can you predict? And frankly, I am not predicting that Kamala will lose. I am definitely hoping that she will lose. But as far as supporting her, I mean, if you actually believe in democracy, I don't understand how you can vote for Kamala.
Oh no, I believe in a monarchy.
Based.
Well, apparently, I mean, how did she become the nominee?
The monarchies. I mean, Monuscus Mobug or whatever is like completely right. We're going back to monarchies, and it's going to be great.
Okay, Trey, I realize when you don't have anything to say, you start being sarcastic, but you could just admit you have nothing to say as opposed to just make
No, but I'm just saying it's like dumb either way. It doesn't change anything. Like I'd rather talk about theology. Theology is way more important than any politics, you know? Or the fantasy
theology is
football.
definitely important, but theology is always, and politics is now, and you cannot escape like a Gnostic to theology when it comes down to actually being like, okay, are you going to vote or not? And like, yeah, I mean, people who are
But,
dumb enough
Jacob,
to buy
we
the
both live in a blue state.
nonsense.
There's nothing we do that will change it. If you move to Florida, yes, your opinion matters. But this is like, I would rather us talk about how many angels can balance on the top of a pinhead, because I think that's actually more important than anything we talk about politics. And you have not shown me a reason to
Trey,
be wrong.
hold on, Trey.
Yes.
Do you seriously think that there are 0 people listening to this discussion who live in a because I know for a fact there was somebody listening earlier tonight from Wisconsin and somebody else listening from Minnesota, right? So that's just not true.
So wait. Somebody who's already an undecided voter.
I hope not. Garth, please tell me for the love of God that you're not an undecided voter. But I do certainly hope that if we can make people with skulls full of mush like Trey and Mark Parker understand the importance of supporting Trump, then that might help Garth know how to address similar people with skulls full of mush around them.
But it would only have to be undecided voters.
Trey, you don't know where like the seed fucking lands or whatever.
No, but I'm just saying, talk about local politics. Talk about how we can, have more bike lanes.
Yes,
talk about
Trey,
that. That's way
Trey,
more
we
important.
realize you've been enchanted by people like Destiny
Who love
to
bike lanes.
neutralize you from the important discussions. Like
Oh, you
that's a very good way of getting people out of the actual, like, people who might end up being on the wrong side, of convincing them to be Garth. Yeah, you're breaking my heart. You are absolutely breaking my heart.
Base. See?
You are absolutely breaking my heart, and I hope to be able to convince you that you need to vote for Trump.
So,
You-
like, what
you-
about? Do you have anything besides the presidential candidates? What else is on the ballot? Are we getting any new bike lanes? Are we getting anything like
No,
that?
no, no. The presidential candidates is what's important.
But isn't there other stuff like whether we
It's
get extra bike
hard.
lanes?
It's not about. It's not about. I'm not like it's. Trump is not running for Jesus. He's not even running to be pastor of your church. He's running to be president of the United States, and you only have a choice between Trump and Kamala Harris. That it's a binary choice. That's the only choice that exists.
Or no choice?
Well, yeah, you could in fact be evil and decide to leave your responsibility. You know what?
No,
What
I'm just
what
gonna vote for
Hannah
these bike
Arendt
lanes.
said? All that evil men require is for to prevail is for good people to do nothing. And
not-
Trey, you are advocating for the victory of evil. Good
No,
job.
I'm advocating for bike
Good
lanes.
job. Good job, Trey. You are the best representative of the banality of evil on this stream today.
No, I'm voting for bike lanes. Okay, that I saw on the last ballot there was bike lanes. I don't know what else is on the ballot. Can you tell me anything else on the ballot, preferably about bike lanes?
Man,
That's all I'm
We're
saying.
talking
Those are
about
more
the
important.
president. We're talking about the president. We're talking about the top of the ballot. What's on top
But
of the hierarchy, Trey? This
but
is
that-
theological.
But it's not effective altruism. I don't think that's at the top of the hierarchy. And I don't know how
Effective
it could be.
altruism is yet another woke mind virus that has captured you. It's a grift. The people who were most for effective altruism are now in jail. Have you noticed?
Does anecdotal evidence prove anything, or what do you want me to do with that?
It's not anecdotal.
I mean,
the effective altruism movement was founded by horrible people, and you're still advocating for it. God have mercy on your soul.
yeah, and Bernie Madoff was a Jew. I don't understand how anecdotes would prove anything else. Like that doesn't
It's
mean
not
any
a
correlation.
Bernie Madoff did not come up with Judaism. And we lost Trey. Let me see what people have been saying in the thing. RJ is undecided. I don't know where you're voting, but if you're undecided, you are making a huge mistake. Politics is downstream of culture, and culture is downstream of religion. So politics is of tertiary importance at best. Correct, but your politics, which are downstream of your religion, which is I would say culture, which is downstream of culture, which is downstream of religion. That is correct, right? If tell me your politics, and I can tell what has been, what is upstream from that, right? And the fact that if somebody is not voting for Donald Trump, it is evidence that there is something wrong both with them culturally and religiously. That is not to say that it's impossible for someone to vote for the Democrats in this election and still be a good person. I think it is possible that there are some people who are genuinely God will forgive them because they know not what they do, but that's where we're standing at. I, for one, look for the instantiation of an Indian style caste system. Yeah, you don't need to identify with the candidates to vote for the candidates. That's 100%. Thank God, Kamala's cackle is so
Witchy.
annoying. I have to say, Ron Coleman on Twitter has just been referring to her as a whore. not Ron Coleman. The Orthodox Jewish, maybe it is Ron Coleman. The Orthodox Jewish First Amendment lawyer. Ron Coleman. It is Ron Coleman. He's been referring to her as a whore. Orthodox Jews usually will not use terms like that unless necessary and applicable, which here it is. It is quite clear she is literally a whore, in both senses of the word, both in prostituting herself physically, doing sexual favors for money, as well as prostituting her values for power. So yeah, she's a whore in every way. And maybe that's more effective in actually making this conversation move where it needs to be. Because I was listening to Glenn Lowry, and he was talking about Oprah singing joy, right, at the Democratic National Convention. And that is part of what is actually affecting our society. I mean, Oprah Winfrey just singing the word joy, right? And I think the retort has to be whore. So yeah, J.D. Vance's half Indian kids and Vivek's kids will found a 1,000-year Hindu dynasty. You have forgotten to mention whatchamacallit. Well, she doesn't have any kids. She's publicly discussed this, actually, Tulsi Gabbard, but she's also Hindu. Yeah, I mean, meritocracy will in fact move us towards the East Asians and the South Asians, which will be good. Indians are great. Yeah.
The Protestant coalition is.
Joy never comes on the streams. I have been wanting Joy to join the streams. Hello, Yoav. מה שלומך? הכל בסדר?
הכל בסדר, שומעים אותי?
כן, שומעים אותך.
Okay, everything is all right. Everything is falling apart. People are glooming, but I'm going to end on a positive note.
Okay.
First, I have no comment about American politics and the recent interviews people mentioned. I wasn't following it close enough. Of course, I know about the elections and about the candidates, and I have nothing to add about it. But you have mentioned that there is a place where the memory of the Holocaust is very important, and this is, of course, Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that it formed a secular religion, and there were two main holidays for that secular religion. That's the Day of Remembrance for the fallen soldiers before the Independence Day, and the Memorial of the Holocaust. And now I'm speaking for myself only, consulting with nobody and expressing nobody else's opinion. I think that population, that part of Israel, the secular Jews, have betrayed in the last years. They have betrayed their own religions. They have desecrated their own holidays, and they're therefore hanging in the air religiously, even if they don't realize it. So I've told in some other opportunity a lot of that remembrance days for the fallen soldiers. I think that also the memory of the Holocaust was seriously desecrated. I cannot even talk about it in public because I will be crucified like there's no tomorrow. I will be seriously crucified if I ever get near to touching that subject, because feelings are extremely deep and elevated. There is a feeling of gloom and doom in Israel at the moment, of course. This is, people will attribute it to the obvious political situation, the war, the dangers. People will blame the government. People will say the government is incompetent or they're actually evil. This is not, in my opinion, the reason for the gloom and doom. I think people are starting to realize deep in their hearts to what extent they have seen, to what extent their own worldview since childhood has been shattered. People are hanging in the air religiously, and that is a vacuum that is going to be filled this way or another. For the good news, there is a huge baby boom in Israel at the moment. I mean, the baby boomers are the result of the Second World War. Similarly or not similarly, I just had the pleasure and the happiness of visiting the maternity wards in Israel in the last week. They are almost cannot cope with the pressure. It's going to be a huge population tick this year, and it's going up. If you follow the events of exactly 9 months ago, some soldiers have begun returning from the more intense part of the war. The baby boom is still on its uptick. It's still going up. I don't have the statistics, except seeing things in my own eyes. Statistics will emerge in later. Alternative altruism, which I don't know anything about except that it caused damage to the souls of people that I know. Well, I am all for altruism. Let those people continue and be altruistic. Do not, by no means, stop being altruistic. Yeah, I think, at least as my very narrow point of view, people are living this kind of nonsense religiously, and people will say, okay, let's have kids and roll the dice again for another generation, and whatever will be, will be. We just do our best, and there's nothing to be done except doing our best. I want to touch briefly on that subject that I cannot touch. People in Israel still have the memory of the Second World War and the following events because the wisdom is passing from grandparent to grandchild. It's a low byte rate information. Some of the older generation just never spoke a word about anything. Just as don't let the kids worry. I had a grandfather, his name was Wolf, and he hanged around that region of Eastern Europe a lot. He's seen a lot of Poles and Russians, and there are a lot of ethnicities around in Eastern Europe of various. They're all been swallowed into the big states. You can, if you look at the map, you see Ukraine and you see Russia. The number of ethnicities there is much larger, and there are cities and places there which name are in the news at the moment, and each ethnicity would pronounce the name of a city differently. For example, there is a city that some people are called Lvov, some people will call it Lviv. Mm-hmm. And I've been calling it Lvov since I was a baby. I didn't know where Lvov was. I couldn't find it on the map. I didn't know that there is a state called Ukraine. I couldn't find it on the map. But I knew that the name of that place is Lvov even before I actually knew what actually happened there. And the fact that I knew how to pronounce it, it means that I had an ethnicity. There was an ethnicity living there that was spelling it or pronouncing it that way, which passed at least that information to me. I mean, it's not a lot about what happened there, but at least I have a way in which I pronounce it, which puts me somehow on that map. So I had this grandfather called Wolf, and he was a very good man, and he was a gentleman. He never spoke a bad word about any ethnicity or any person. So he had never had any complaint about the Germans or the Poles or the Russians. And then he luckily emigrated to Israel in time to escape the wars of it. So he had his business started with the Arabs, and he had to participate with the War of Independence and contribute his bit in that. I never had any bad word from him about the Muslims or the Arabs, neither personal or as a group. Actually, he didn't speak much. The one thing that he once told me, is beware of Galicians, people of Galicia.
Galicianer, yeah.
Galicianers, yeah. And I had no idea what he meant as a little child. Absolutely no idea what he meant. So I was thinking about it for a while. And, Galicia is somewhere offshoot or nearby Romania. So I thought he was warning me against people from Romania. And of course, not about the Christian population of Romania, which neither of us cared at all. There's not many of them in Israel at the moment, but of Jews coming from Romania, quite a lot of them. And I thought, okay, why is he warning me of the Jewish people coming from Romania? Well, as it happens in everywhere, every ethnicity has some kind of a stigma. It's just in the human nature that you are. There are views circulating about every ethnicity, and particularly for the Jews of Romania, the stigma was that they are thieves. Just happened that way. So I thought he was warning me against the Jews coming from Romania because they tend to be thieves. Which doesn't make sense because why wouldn't he warn me against the Nazis or the Germans or the Russians or the Arabs or before that? And I now, in view of recent events and things that I learned about wars happening in the east of Europe, Second World War, and immediately after it, I think I know what he meant. And I would have completely agree with him. But there's nobody in Israel that I can share this view with. It's absolutely not an expression that you can say aloud and stay alive. So there I am, silent, but still optimistic. There is a new generation. They will sort out everything, I'm sure. End of speech.
I want to ask you, there seems to be, and I am hopeful that it's actually not from the Jewish community. There are a lot of people who are trying to put intergenerational guilt on the Germans, who are reducing Germany and Germans and German heritage to Nazi Germany and World War II. I heard Noah Yuval Harari, I'm not a fan of his, say that Germany needs to get over the Holocaust, which was an important thing. Again, I'll say, if you haven't listened to my podcast on post-Platonic Felix on yes, Yamach Shemo, but part of Yamach Shemo, may his name be obliterated, is not living in the shadow of such people. And I have to say, I think it's first and foremost the Jewish community, and I wonder if you agree, because we come from very different places, that the Germans needs to be able to recognize their history is much longer than just World War II, and that to some extent we've become too focused on the Shoah as the focus of human history. Certain, I dislike it being the focus of Jewish history. It can't be the most important thing of our religion.
Okay. First, as a matter of fact, people in Israel are looking at Germany at a very low resolution. It's a blob on the map. So the Germans will always remember in their memory with the sort of that will be their memory of, or their opinion on Germany. It will not change until they will move into Germany and start interacting with people on the daily basis. That's how people are. What do I know about the people of Rhodesia? I don't know. Whatever stuff I once read in the newspaper. Second, I know a little bit about Germany because professionally I interacted with the German a lot during my very long career. I was in the printing industry, and Germany has been publishing printing superpower. So I know them as people. I absolutely have no complaint, no grudge. Don't need them to change. I don't need them to forget anything or to remember anything. They are good people. Let them go on with their life, and I wish them the best of luck. Unfortunately, as far as I know of Germany, it's either doesn't exist anymore or soon to cease to exist. So it's all become mute. I mean, yes, there was once a Germany, and that way it ended. Maybe it should have ended better or whatever, but I don't see a bright future for Germany. Now, there is one incident that proves to me that I actually, so I know Germany for many years and I know the Germans. There was this one incident that just proved to me that I actually know nothing. And therefore I shouldn't speak about it because I don't know the Germans really. I cannot think for them. That was many years ago. When, let's say it was 1990, which memory was a bit fresh there. And there was a young person. He didn't live through this. He was not alive during the Second World War. His name was von something. So he was of the cream on the top of the old Germany, of the nobility, in his background, not in that moment. And we had the chat. I mean, after doing whatever business we had a small social interaction. And suddenly he holds the chair in front of him. So we are facing each other, and he's facing me, and he's holding the chair in front of him as to separate between us. And he's holding the back of the chairs with his hands so tight that his knuckles are becoming white. And he says to me, I don't have a grudge against you in spite of everything. he doesn't have a grudge against me in spite of everything. And he's speaking from the bottom of his heart. And I just don't understand it. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying I don't understand I'm not him. I don't have the view of history, reality, politics that he has. I just respect him as a person, and that's all I can do.
Interesting. That is very interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I have kind of an overly global vision. I do want to see. First of all, I think Germany is incredibly important as a country, as a leader of Europe. I think it's more of a leader than France is in Europe, and I think Europe is incredibly important. And I think, I mean, this is all stuff that Yuval Harari. So this was right after the discussion that I'm thinking of, where they spoke to him was right after Russia invaded Ukraine, and Harari was saying that Germany needs to move on from its memories of World War II because, and he put it something like this: as a historian, as an Israeli, as a Jew, there's no country I trust more to not repeat the mistakes of the Holocaust than Germany.
Okay, first of all, I do not like the man, and this is to be
I
very
agree with
polite,
you.
and that is to be very polite on the internet. I don't like his science. I don't like the man. Second, what he says makes sense. It makes logic on the superficial level. And if that was true, I would have no problem with the memory of the Holocaust that it is conducted in Israel. And I have just expressed, I have reservation about that. So what does it tell? Okay. People in Israel have a very strong remembrance of the event leading to the destruction of the Second Temple. Really very vivid historical knowledge and regard of that. Does it help?
It brings
No,
me.
not
It
at
brings
all.
me. It brings me to tears every Tisha B'Av.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, yes, you know the history, and you fully accept your on an intellectual level. You accept your sin, and you say you repent of them, and you swear never to repeat the mistakes again. Doesn't help at all. So, how
Really,
does the man?
Yoav? It doesn't help at all.
Okay, again, it's on an individual level. Well, okay, I mean, look at the state of the politics in Israel at the moment. On the aggregate, does it look as if we have any memory of the destruction of the Second Temple? Looks to me as we don't.
Do you know what I'm remembering? I'm remembering the famous video clip that went viral when the protesters went to Bnei Barak, and there's that clip of that old man who was greeted with Shabbat songs and cholent, and he started crying. You know the video. You know the video I'm talking about. You saw it?
I don't watch those videos. I live within walking distance of Bnei Brak.
You heard about it? You didn't hear about it?
I knew that such event happened. I'm there, yes. I don't need to watch any videos. Yes, I see things happening in the streets in front of my own eyes. It's individual. people will react anyway. Again, to end on a positive note, there is a young generation. There's going to be a huge younger generation coming up. The dice is being rolled again, and let's trust the Netzach Israel, the internal spirit of Israel. I just have to trust it and go on with my life.
I mean, obviously, I view the world very differently than you do, and I think that's part of why I appreciate you you being here and showing your view. At the same time, I mean, my view is very much that if my view very much is that if those people who do think of Tisha B'Av, I would have been very surprised if it was the other way around. Not that there aren't, God have mercy on our souls, Haredim who riot or demonstrate in ways that they shouldn't. There are. But I would have been very, very surprised if the wave had been the other way around, where a bunch of Haredim were going to go demonstrate in a secular neighborhood, and they were greeted with, I don't know, shakshuka and electronic dance music. I don't know what exactly is the minhag hamakom in North Tel Aviv, but like I do think it is Tisha B'Av which made those people in Bnei Barak greet people with cholent and music.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I have to go off stage. If this is going to be long, if you're going to continue for more than an hour, then I will join on the other end.
I'll see if anybody else is willing to join. So if it's going, you're always welcome back. We always appreciate hearing.
Thanks for the stage.
Bye-bye, Yoa. No, you should never ever watch either Candace Owens or Rabbi what's his name. So there are people in the world who I sometimes look at and shudder to think that I might be similar to them in ways that I hope I am not. Baal of Tarsus, one of those guys. Martin Luther, certainly one of those guys. Rabbi what's his name? Definitely one of those guys. Yeah, the problem is, Cal, Chabad doesn't do Charamim, and there's no until the Yanuka gets invited for Brang at 770 for Gimel Tammuz. There's no possibility of Cherem for Rabbi what's his name. The closest was a condemnation certain rabbis did of his book Kosher Jesus, which we will talk about whatever people want to talk about. If you want to jump on, Mark, it's been a while since you've been on. We'll talk about whatever people want to talk about. But Jewish Insider Baseball is Rabbi Kalman. Is Kalman short for Colonimus? It is, isn't it? I think Kalman is short for Colonimus.
I gotta ask something.
You go ahead, ask something.
How do you explain Zoomers to Boomers?
Zoomers. I did not pin the link, but I did put it into the chat, Mark. Zoomers are young people who are rebelling against the hippies.
How are we rebelling against hippies?
Well, I mean, I would actually say Alex P. Keaton is probably the best literary figure for Zoomers to understand, for Boomers to understand Zoomers.
All right, so who's Alex P. Keaton?
Aha! Let's look up Alex P. Keaton. Alex P. Keaton. There he is in all of his glory.
Oh, is this the Gordon Gekko guy?
Who's Gordon Gekko?
Right, the Gordon Gekko guy.
Mark Lefebvre. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm hanging in. How are you doing?
Good. Do you remember Alex P. Keaton?
I don't know who that is. It doesn't ring a bell.
I will remind you who Alex P. Keaton is. Alex P. Keaton is a fictional character on the American television sitcom Family Ties, which aired on NBC for 7 seasons from 1982 to 1989.
Great psyop. Great psyop. Yeah.
Michael J. Fox added the middle initial himself during an audition for the role. So Michael J. Fox actually became kind of famous because of this. And so the character was supposed to be, I mean, it definitely was a psyop. So the parents in Family Ties were hippie parents. And Alex was supposed to, in a comical way, be the young Republican Nixon fan who was rebelling against them.
Mm-hmm.
And he became deeply loved by people in ways like I think like people. I actually kind of see myself. I think growing up, I modeled myself through Alex P. Keaton. I think Seth programmed me to want to be Alex P. Keaton.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I mean, it was fun while it lasted.
Rebellion, anti-rebellion, right? It's the flip.
Yeah, it's well, that's the thing which I realized. I mean, so my Twitter profile is kind of a joke, kind of not. All parts of it are particular jokes. And one of the jokes there is I'm a recovering conservative. Because what I feel like happened to me was I fell into the character of Alex P. Keaton, which was a controlled opposition type character. And certainly into law school, I was playing that character as opposed to actually being, I don't think I am a conservative. I was convinced that I was a conservative.
But if that was the way to rebel,
then
the people who were prone to rebellion might have rebelled in that direction, but that's what makes it a psyop, right? Because that the conservatism is like, definitionally, right? And so you can't, it doesn't actually work. So it breaks a bunch of things in the world, which we saw.
Yeah, I have some of that tism. So Mark, how do you explain Zoomers to Boomers?
Why would you bother? I don't know. I don't understand.
It's like there's the generational handoff. Like, how do you entice Boomers to do the generational handoff? Right? Because a lot of them are just like, oh, these crazy kids. What am I gonna do?
well, that's the perception of the Zoomers, but that isn't what's happening. And that's most of the problem, right?
You sure?
Like, Yeah, 100% positive. You see it all over the place. Like people give good. Boomers have been giving good advice all along. Because the Zoomers don't want to do that, and they don't have to because video games, and so they don't. And then they go, nobody gave us what we wanted. It's like, well, actually, they did. You had to work for it, but you didn't want to do that, so you didn't do it. And that's fair, like whatever. But also, like,
a boomer right
it's
now.
not.
You're
You want the handoff your
boomer
way,
right
and that didn't happen, right? That's it. But the handoff's not there.
I mean, this is the point that President Foxman was making, and I'm not sure he's completely without. I don't 100% disagree with you, but I do think the fact is, well, to put it in Vervaeke terms, a child starts off not as a human, and you love him into being a human. And I think the Zoomers needed their parents to love them into humanity, which I think a lot of our parents thought that loving us meant not guiding us.
The Zoomers don't have boomer parents, but okay.
Yeah, but you understand.
No, look, there's a separate problem, right? There's a handoff issue. The handoff issue is not as stated. The problem you're pointing to is way more important and way more to the point, which is, yeah, like let's suppose, just hypothetically, that somebody convinced you that individualism was a state you could inhabit in the universe or something completely inane. Then what might happen is, but what might happen is you might project that onto the world. And if you try to project that onto the world with children, then they do have to raise themselves, and they will, because they're individuals. That can't be true. Like, I don't know how we got there, but we got there, to your point. Like, absolutely we did. That was horrific. That gap has to be filled. So what we do is we fund, in the United States, I can't speak to all the countries I haven't lived in, but in the United States, we fund federally education. Now, when people describe education, right, and this has been true for probably 30 years, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, what they're describing is formation. They're just like using the wrong word. Okay. But what they're doing is a combination of formation and training. And there's nothing wrong with training. I have a video on this, obviously, on navigating patterns. There's nothing wrong with training, right? There's nothing wrong with proper education, which is more about how you think, right? Training you to think, not telling you what you think, right? But in order to train people how to think, you have to tell them what to think, which means the things that you tell them what to think are unbelievably, unimaginably important. That's true. But we haven't been doing that. We've been doing formation, because formation is supposed to come from the home. If it doesn't come from the home, there's a gap. That gap gets filled by the school. And so that's what we've been doing. And then everyone cries indoctrination. And I'm like, well, fair. Yes, if you do formation in school, that is technically indoctrination. And shame on your parents, not shame on the school, not shame on the government. That's wrong. Shame on your parents. And they were psyoped. So they're not 100% to blame. Totally get it. But also that is their responsibility. Your formation is the responsibility of your parents. And they probably did a poor job. And that there's probably a very marked difference between the poor job that parents did in the 50s versus the poor job that they did in the 80s or something. I can buy into all that. That's fair. But like, how would you quantify and classify all that? That's a bigger issue. That's why I don't deal with issues at that layer, because that layer is pointless. It's all coming from somewhere, right? And the question is, where does that come from? Well, that's the individualism, objectivism, materialism. And I think, and again, of course, I have a video on that. Right. I think that if you hit any one of those potholes, you'll hit the other two automatically.
Okay. So first question, is there anything we can do? Second question, is there anything we should do? And third question, will we do it?
About what?
All of the problems that you were describing.
There's lots you can do. I mean, I break people out of this all the time. It's
What do you
the
mean
way
break
I
people out of it?
time consuming, but like you okay, so my latest video on enchantment might help that situation a lot, right? Because part of the basic thesis is enchantment's going to happen. It's going to happen to you. There's no way around that, right? You're going to get enchanted or fooled or bamboozled or brainwashed or, hypnotized or whatever. I don't care what term you use. They're all actually pretty much the same. They're all forms of enchantment. You're going to get enchanted. So you have to have a mechanism to know if the enchantment that's happening to you is good or bad, because you get enchanted by the dragonflies in your yard. Like that's good. It's fine. Like it's not a big deal. It may not be for the good or the most good or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not dangerous to you or others, right? But if you get enchanted by the future unburdened by the past, that's what's in my video, then you're screwed. Or the earlier spell, which was hope and change, you're screwed. Like you're screwed. Those are bad spells cast by bad people for bad things, and they in one case they did bad things with it, right? And so you need tools around that. That's probably the single most important thing to realize, is that you will get enchanted. You need to pay attention to that. If you can pay attention to that, then you can probably tell the good from the bad. And then if all you're being enchanted by are neutral and good things, then the world is getting better, like for everybody. So just focus on that. Like you don't need to go any further. And the distractions, which are psyops, like whatever the hell is going on in Ukraine, I don't even care. I'm very sad because like Ukraine seems bent on killing all the Ukrainians, which is a weird thing, but I guess this is where we're at now. I can't pay attention to that. And if I did, it wouldn't make the world better, but it would make the world worse, like for sure, right? Because I'm not going there. I can't live there. I wouldn't want to live there. I'm not even going to visit probably ever. If I do, I can skill up just before I visit. Like that. So why do I need to know about like the unfoldings because I'm not there. So anything I get comes through filters, which is a good thing. You need filters, like you're not on the ground. That's fair. But like, I don't know what those filters. I don't know what their goal is, right? Like, and they might be lunatics saying that we should fund the death of more Ukrainians with U.S. money, and I'm a no on funding the inevitable death of people for no. There's no end game here, right?
Well, I think there is an end game. It's just nobody wants to admit.
Oh, they may have an end game in mind. The end game they have can't happen, but that's a different problem.
Well, no, okay. So the establishment, the political establishment in Washington D.C. thinks, and I would say accurately, that Russia is being punished by us sending money and letting Ukraine bleed.
Some of them do. Some of them think we need to destroy the evidence of all the money laundering we've been doing, right? Some of them think that, we need to cover up our crimes against Russia that we have evidence for in Ukraine, right? Now they all look the same. So conspiracy, they're one group. They're not one group. And there's other reasons for people,
right? It's Baptists and bootleggers. If you are not aware of that economic concept, I highly recommend you make yourself
right. But that's the problem of the world. So just to continue my answer to your question, be able to recognize enchantment and don't try to avoid it. Like there's no defense against the dark arts. That's retarded. Okay.
I disagree with you.
Think about the world. It's a bad frame, right?
I disagree with you, but
I know, but it's definitely a bad frame because you'd have to identify the dark arts. That hasn't been done. And then you'd have to identify a defense, and that definitely hasn't been done. There's a psyop going on about you can do this and this is what it is, and there's no this, right? And so it's a pointer with no end point.
I don't want to get hung up on this.
To fix the problem, first recognize enchantment and good from bad, right? And then what you need to do is you need to start to live in an enchanted world. And part of that is understanding things like there's no such thing as World War II. This is fundamentally the wrong way to think about what happened because it's middle out thinking. Okay. Anybody, I've never even seen a single historian, I'm sure there's one or two out there, but like I've never run into them, and I've done a lot of research on this, who doesn't think that the cause of, quote, World War II is the Treaty of Versailles. Well, the Treaty of Versailles is the treaty that ends World War I. So is there a World War II? My answer is no, of course not. Because if the solution to the First Great War is something that is inevitably going to cause a Second Great War, and I think that's, I don't know how you read the Treaty of Versailles and not realize that every contemporary at the time, and I do mean everyone, said this.
No, Mark, I mean, that's
right?
part of the reason we call it World War II, because it was the sequel and it was the continuation of the same story.
But you can't take that and start there to talk about, well, first of all, Hitler was specifically, I mean, Peterson even talks about this, right? Like there are specific events that happened in the first act of the Great War that formed certain aspects of Hitler's personality that gives him this proclivity to do a bunch of things that otherwise, could not have happened. Right.
Yeah. I think you might just as well just call it World War Part 1 and World War Part 2.
That's fine. Yeah.
And talking about World War II in complete separation from World War I is a mistake. It's a clear mistake.
Right, but I think further than that, you can't understand the Great War without understanding what led up to that, because there is a clear chain there, and so the chain is something like, the solution to the French Revolution happens to be Napoleon, obviously, actually for real, like even though he's not French, he's Corsican and can't think of anything worse than Corsicans. What ends up happening though is, he gets famous on precision. Like he's a precision cannoneer, right? Like that's like he puts numbers on a paper to calculate trajectories. That's what he's known for, right? And then he applies that to greater strategy and like just decimates forces 10 times his size, left, right, and center. Like the guy's amazing. He's an amazing, strategic genius. And there's no question about it, right? And he does a bunch of other tricks too. If you look into the history, you start to realize, there's a bunch of tricks that he uses. But the problem is, and this is because of the French Revolution, which goes all the way back to Henry VIII, roughly. But the beheading of the English king causes all kinds of problems. One of which is the monarchical system in the European sphere, in the European countries, collapses. And Napoleon kind of makes that explicit. And instead of having, I don't know, I'm going to remember the exact number. The last Holy Roman Emperor had something like 120 titles. That, it turns out, that is the correct answer. Any other answer is actually wrong. Napoleon says, I'm just the emperor. I'm just the emperor. And then he forces the bishop to put the crown on his head, which is backwards, right? The religious authority is supposed to convey from above the authority down to, quote, Caesar, right? And then they're supposed to remain separate, right? Not totally separate, but like render unto Caesar is still a thing, right? And then that doesn't happen under Napoleon. He inverts all of that. And then that sets the stage for, Bismarck to just draw random lines. And Bismarck and Hitler define like 80% of our modern world still, including all the tech except maybe transistors. That's it. Everything else, we're living in the legacy of Hitler's Third Reich. All the technology, nuclear power, all electrical transmission, rockets, like pretty much everything. Flight. A lot of the flight stuff is all German technology. It's not invented anywhere. It's not invented in France or the UK I think the UK invents radar. Yay, or maybe it was us. There's always an argument, right? But it doesn't matter. Like these are minor things, and it's not like the Germans didn't have that tech. computers, Zeiss and the Enigma machine, arguably that's the first practical implementation. So you end up realizing that changed the world. And if you don't understand, like a lot of people do this backwards thing where they're like, well, I don't understand why people followed Hitler. And I'm like, you need to read a book once ever. Like the question isn't why did people follow Hitler? The question is, why did anybody not follow Hitler?
Well, I'm thinking like we really need to start making people read Mein Kampf again, because like not having read it is really causing a lot of brain rot.
I agree with that, but like people need to understand Hitler performed an actual miracle in contemporary times. I think so long ago, like I was a teenager when I read this, but like I was in microfiche reading contemporary papers, newspapers and white papers, and they weren't white papers back then, but treaties that people were writing. And I think even Churchill wrote this, like in 5 years, or maybe it was 3 years, but it wasn't more than 5 years, the idea of the German people will be extinguished. And like everybody thought that was going to be true because of the Treaty of Versailles. Like they were convinced. I mean, this blew up the first attempt at the UN. It caused Woodrow Wilson, who was a hopeless idealist and like, I'm not a fan, but whatever, to quit. Like nobody could, quote, save Germany. Right. And so how did the Weimar Republic turn around? Well, that actually was, to be fair, Hitler. Like he definitely did that. Like that was like, he did that almost single-handedly. I mean, he had a big group of people with him, but it was really the force of his personality that made it all work. So and like, you don't understand, people like Lindbergh and stuff were very big supporters of the anti-Jewish idea, to the extent that some of the reports I read, I don't know how accurate they are, where Jews could not be employed in New York City and were fired. Were fired. Like there was no Jewish employment outside of the little Jewish enclaves in New York City because of the popularity of Hitler. And that was true everywhere. That was true in Russia. That was true in every European country, even if they were, suspicious or had previously been at war with Germany. Like this guy had everybody under his spell. And that's really interesting, right? To the point where we take a vote of 900 Jews and turn them away. And we've been trying to make up for that ever since. And also FDR is a scumbag, but because he did it. But like, that's all the force of Hitler. Irrespective of all the other things you think about with the war in Poland, which wasn't a country, right? That's entirely an affectation of the Treaty of Versailles, right? They hadn't been a country before that. You can just look at a map. They're not there. And they're not there for some decades, like 20, 30 years. I don't know, maybe more than that. I forget. So like, if you don't know all that, it looks strange. And Churchill definitely sped up the conflict that we call World War II, or Great War Part II, or however you want to frame it. He did that. I would argue he shouldn't have done that, although I'm still a big Churchill fan, right? I'm like, Hitler was going to do what Hitler was going to do, and if it wasn't Hitler, it would have been somebody else, because the German people were literally starving in the street. So like some kind of conflict was inevitable. So then, what does that mean? It means that the UK is trying to revivify Europe, the European countries, for no apparent reason whatsoever. Because I'm a let's pull out of Europe tomorrow and we'll see what happens. Like, I'm fairly sure I know what's going to happen, but I don't know how long we can hold Europe together from fighting with Europe, because I don't think you can do it very long. So at some point, the question becomes, well, should Churchill have gotten involved, and should he have dragged the UK into that inevitable conflict? So the question is, for this, what's the guy's name, Cooper or whatever? It's the wrong question. The question to answer is, do you think that war was inevitable? My answer is absolutely. You just go look at contemporary sources. That battle, that whole idea was going to happen, whether it was Hitler or somebody else. there was going to be a big battle.
The
That battle was
detail in his interview with Tucker that really like it was just salient to me most was he starts off quite clearly and he makes fun of these people who give an anecdote of a and he names Stalin, for example. You know, Stalin as a child, he did something, and because of that, it was obvious that that's what it was going to be, what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then later in the same interview, he gives an anecdote of Churchill as a child playing with his toys, and somebody stopped him from warring with his toys.
Yeah.
And that's how he knew that Churchill was a psychopath.
Yep.
And it's like,
Typical materialism.
what are you doing? Like you just told me like and so he Churchill was an adult playing with toys, and I mean, like,
Who cares?
this
But-
well, my big thing is stop telling me history in terms of great men, although I realize that's how we see it, like that those are the frames in which we can comprehend history. But like, I seriously believe that if Churchill had had a heart attack, history would be at least a little bit different. But like,
vastly.
I don't know how. Like, if Adolf Hitler had a heart attack, if he had been shot in when he was shot, and if he had been shot more grievously and he had died, I don't believe that World War II would not have happened. Do you believe World War II would have not happened?
In Europe, it would have. This battle that we call World War II was, I am still of the mind that it is inevitable. Now, the question is, and Churchill did this, like Churchill emboldened Poland to stand up and cause trouble with the Germans. Like, he did that. There's no, we have signed letters and stuff. And he was not empowered to do this. So it's very much a coup against his own English hierarchy. There's no question about that. Does that make him a psychopath? I don't think so.
Well, I mean Cal is making the exact same point,
right?
And I have to say, like, people diagnosing others with psychopathy,
there's no evidence.
Like,
just no
psychopaths
evidence.
Are not competent. Generally, psychopathic people, it is very, very rare that a psychopath is able to become a leader. They just don't form. Yeah, they don't form, like, the idea that even Hitler was a psychopath, I think is just faulty.
He doesn't appear to be a psychopath either.
Yeah,
at all.
Yeah. I don't know that there was any world leader. Pol Pot, maybe. Pol Pot.
Yeah.
Maybe. And I don't even know that much about Pol Pot.
But I think all that would have happened is if Churchill hadn't done what he did, which, like, the guy broke the rules and he did something very, very bad, because, like, he did not even have the authority to tell Poland, yeah, go ahead, we'll back your ass and it'll be fine, because obviously that was dumb and it wasn't true, right? But the idea that the UK would get involved, sure, the UK, I mean, Churchill's the guy who dragged the UK into the European conflict. No question about it. But now there's worse questions, like, should he have? Like, I can't even answer that. Like, because I think, interestingly, in the US, for some reason, and I actually don't understand this, I'm not going to pretend I understand this, we seem very tied to the UK and not to the rest of Europe. Even the Europeans that came over here from we'll call them European countries, aren't patriotically tied to the countries they came from the way they seem to be tied to the UK for whatever reason. Now, I mean, there's a lot of good thesis around why that would be true, and the legacy of the Magna Carta, the breaking with continental philosophy, which is garbage, right? And which is a real, like, there's a real transformation from continental philosophy to the Magna Carta to the U.S. Constitution. Like, it's a clear line, and it's a huge improvement in all steps. But why we're we are overly attached to the UK, I don't know. I mean, that's why we screwed up the Middle East after the first act of the Great War. Like, we caused all the problems in the Middle East. That was us and England, like, period, end of statement. And we've been trying to fix it ever since, to be a little bit fair to us, but also too stupid to do the simple right thing, and trying to install Western virtues and values in a place that doesn't care, doesn't have them, and can't use them, right? And that's very confusing. But like you have to understand how. What are the real questions? The real questions are, what would the war have looked like if England hadn't gotten involved? That's a good question. I don't know. What would have happened to Europe if any number of things had unfolded differently, right? Because you're probably never getting around the attack on Russia. I don't, the share power thing that they agreed to between Hitler and Stalin, like, I don't think that was a thing that could have happened. I just don't see the room for it. Right? And I could be wrong about that. That would take a lot more study of Russia on my part than I'm probably going to do. But like, there's some complications, because at some point Germany just runs out of oil. And the only place to get oil is Russia. And if they're not giving it to you because they're ramping up to remodernize, is what they called it, right? They're trying to modernize again to jump in the game. Then, I think you have to invade them. But there's a question about that. But then there's better questions. Like, at some point, and it doesn't matter where you put this. I mean, Ben Shapiro famously said, if you could go back, to kill baby Hitler, you wouldn't kill baby Hitler because he's a baby, and you'd rehabilitate him, right? It's a reasonable argument. But my extension on that argument is, at some point Hitler went wrong or turned bad. What was that point? And I think the problem for, quote, Germany is that you have two forces going on. One is Hitler's fantasy idea of tall, blue-eyed, blonde, Aryan race people being Germans, which
he wasn't himself, which is the hilarious part.
And neither were any Germans ever, or any people in that region ever, right? So it's a weird, like, how did he even get away with that? Well, there's some enchantment, right? Like, but that doesn't hold. Like, that vision, because it's wrong, probably there might be other reasons. I don't want to speculate too much or anything. That doesn't hold. What holds is the sacrifice of a scapegoat. When this is where we get somewhat close to Girard, which I have 2 videos on with Justin Wells on Girard, by the way, on navigating patterns. But like, and Girard's not a good dude, but he says a lot of interesting things that are correct, and then he goes pure evil every time. It's reliable and consistent.
I don't know much about him.
You'll watch those videos. You'll know.
Yeah, I saw those, and I considered it, but
if you want my notes, let me know. I'll put you on the Google email. You can. They're not long, but I got a whole summary thing. But like you need a scapegoat. He finds a convenient scapegoat in the people who say, we're not going to invest in Germany. We think it's a lost cause, and everybody else did. Like, why not the people in Germany too, right? And so they get lumped in with, at first just with political prisoners. But I think in order to keep the dream of Germany alive, because it's not a thing, it was never a thing. The idea that Germany could be a country, to me, is still silly, right? He has to just sacrifice a lot of lives. I think that's the best way to look at it. Whatever you want to make a mystical connotation from that or whatever, it doesn't matter. But that seems to be what happened. And when that sort of runs out, that's right, because it's one of those asymptotically increasing curves, Germany falls, right, rather explicitly, and then it gets split into 2 pieces, and more trauma for the Germans. And that's the best way to look at it that I can come up with. So, and I didn't come up with that. I mean, obviously, I'm drawing pieces from all over the place. Interestingly, nobody's put those pieces together that way that I could find. But like that to me is the way to think about it. That has grand implications for how the world's working now too, right? Like, what are the enchantments that we're under now? I mean, you want to go back to Alex Keaton and Set. Fair, like absolutely, that enchantment happened to a bunch of people. Thinking back, I mean, I've seen that show at least in reruns or whatever. It's a very enchanting character, right? But there was always that undertone. It's a bit like Big Bang Theory. I mean, it's the same thing, right? Like it's this clown world upside down tweaking. In the same way that I never saw Shrek, thank goodness. In the same way Shrek is, right? And when I heard Jonathan Majot do his thing on Shrek, I was like, oh well, yeah, you're right. In the first 5-10 minutes, the whole thing's right there. You're ripping up a fairy tale book and wiping your ass with it. That's fair. I mean, you may be evil, but at least you're honest. I mean, okay. I mean, points for honesty. But when you're at the point where the evil is just being evil and not even hiding it, there's a lot of enchantment going on and people aren't able to see it. And that's a big problem. That's why I think first see the enchantment and go after the good. That'll help. Everything else is a lost cause. Like you're not gonna cast your own protection 1 spell with that's not gonna happen. Like that's not how it works.
Super random question. You got books all over the place. What's your top 3?
3?
Yep.
For what purpose? Like I don't.
Just off the top of your head.
I never have books
that comes to
my
mind.
head. I think everybody should read Freakonomics, which is Dubner. You should read the whole series though. I think there's 3 or 4 of them. Everybody should read Fooled by Randomness. That's Nassim Taleb, because that's right up this alley. You want the closest thing to discovering when people are screwing with you, especially with numbers, and why you are cooperating in that. Fooled by Randomness is a great book for that. And if I had to pick a third, of course, read all of Taleb's books. Ignore his Twitter entirely because it's garbage, but like all his books are excellent. But if I had to pick a third, what would I pick? Let me see. I don't even have my best books here. Oh, some of my best books are here. I would probably go with I don't know. I can't even. There's too many good books in the world. I guess read the 10-Day MBA by Steven Silberg. I really love that book because part of understanding the world is understanding the complexities of business. And it's only 10 chapters. And so in theory, I mean, I wouldn't read it that quickly, but in 10 days, you can learn, we'll say, all the key core components of a business. And that at least helps you understand how valuable they are and also makes you a better employee, which is really important. Because if you want to cooperate with people, you've got to understand what they're struggling with. And the fact that a decision doesn't make any sense to you doesn't mean it's not the right decision. It just means that from your perspective, it's not optimal. But you could also be wrong about that, right? Because what's good for the group is often not good for the company. And there's lots of reasons for that. Like there's HR reasons to fire people, no matter how good an engineer they are, right? And there's also engineering reasons to keep somebody, no matter how pissed off HR is. And balancing that is effectively impossible. But the 10-Day MBA at least gives you a flavor for all that, all the trade-offs and balances and complexities of a business. So if I had to pick 3, those are the 3 that I would pick off the top of my head. I wish I had all my books out. This is a tiny smattering of books, actually, most of which are technical.
Anthony is making a great joke, which I appreciate. Also, The Art of the Deal.
I'm not sure I'm a no one. I haven't read that one, but I know the principles behind
I
it.
can guarantee you Anthony has not read that one. Anthony is one of the voices I actually have intense respect for because he reads a lot. And he has a wry sense of humor. So
Who's Anthony?
Anthony is the guy who on my Discord talks about ancient history with Yosef. And I don't understand half the stuff they're talking about because it's details of archaeology that's like way beyond anything I have read. Yeah.
Well, that gets interesting, right? Because it's cool to I mean, one of the tricks that Peterson does, which I just think is so brilliant and totally underrated, is he keeps contrasting the same pattern in different historical contexts. In I don't even know if he's doing it, we'll say rationally or consciously or whatever, but like it's great because you really get a flavor for the pattern that way. I think that's part of how he psyops people into seeing patterns all of a sudden when they couldn't before. He doesn't go far enough. PVK is actually right about that. Unfortunately, I don't think PVK has a particularly good answer to that problem, but at least he's right. Like Peterson only brings you so far, and you got to go the rest of the way. And I don't, as much as I like Peugeot, I don't think Peugeot is the rest of that way.
I have no idea what Graham is saying.
Waffle, rolling on the floor laughing. I thought you jailbroke a GBT to LARP Hitler, but instead you just had a reptilian on. That's either you or Mark, because both of you are bald. And not me. I have a full, luscious locks of hair.
So
that's not why, but I like
when Jonathan said wait, the Grim dice don't actually work, I actually think the Grim dice do work.
Of course they work. You already bought into them by watching the stream. Yes, you've duh. Like, sorry. Like, I mean, if you buy into it, you've already bought into it by watching the stream, then of course it works. But that's on you. So, like, it's your choice.
It says question Hitler as a title, but no Hitler here. We've actually discussed Hitler quite a bit.
Where's the Hitler AMA?
No, I think he's being kind and at least saying none of us are Hitler, which, actually I take that as a compliment, especially from him, since he's rather prone to the metaphorical, we'll say, and there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I happy news. I like it. No Hitlers here, but yeah, we did kind of cover, So Jacob, what I haven't heard though is really your take on how to understand this Cooper guy. It's Cooper, right? And how he's casting Churchill.
So, I mean, okay. Part of the reason I am doing this stream is I'm not 100% sure how to think about this stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted, like, if I had just something to present, I would have done a presentation, but I wanted a discussion. So I am holding my views rather loosely. I think Abigail Shrier made a very salient point, which is this interview happening at this point in time is going to impact the election. And there's even the fact that the discussion is being had on Twitter, the way it's being had on Twitter, making Jews less likely to vote for Trump, making Jews less likely to contribute to Trump, making Jews more likely to contribute to Kamala Harris, is definitely affecting things. And I don't know that much about this. What's his name? Cooper.
Yeah, I think.
I don't know that much about him I could certainly believe that he is another deep state, like he glows in the dark. I could believe he glows in the dark. I don't know
Yeah,
whether he does or not.
he's a useful idiot at best, and I don't think anybody's.
Yeah, but I think that's what glows in the dark kind of means. Like, if you're captured, I mean, the guy who pulled the trigger to shoot Trump, right? Like, I don't actually believe he was employed by the FBI.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Fair.
But
Yeah, where is the line between, we'll say, allowing a convenient opportunity, right? Because that's the one of the videos I'm gonna do, is Russian Revolution, and what you kind of find out with Russian Revolution, and particularly the lead up to things like World War I, is that there are actual, like, to be fair, actual operations by not government operatives typically, but guys like Trotsky, where they are fomenting the anarchists and paying them money and supplying them with stuff so something will happen, right? In one case, it's the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, right? What people don't realize about that is there's 3 different groups at that event trying to assassinate him, right? And I think, if I remember correctly, I might be getting this wrong because it's been a while. I think 2 of them were funded by the same group, but one was funded by a completely different group with completely different aims. So just because you want Franz Ferdinand assassinated doesn't mean that you want the same thing after that. And this is where people get confused and start with the lizard people conspiracy stuff. Right? Because they're like, they must have wanted this. It's like,
when you're trying to understand things, you make things agentic because that helps simplify what's going on.
Sure.
You
flatten the word.
Yeah. And when you're dealing with something as big as this, that's why I think the language of spirits and magic is actually very useful. I like the term egregore.
Well, I don't like the term egregore.
Yeah, I know.
Spirit is a better term, but sure.
It's fine by me. So that's the first thing. Like, the fact this discussion came up on Tucker before the election, I think, is sabotaging the support for Trump, which is important. And how that came to be is also important. If it's even just the stupidity of Tucker to run this interview right now, it's important.
So you're not so interested in the moral question of who was good and who was bad, which was the question that was really raised in Twitter that I saw. You're more, and it wasn't the only one. Like, everything you're saying is perfectly true too. But you're more concerned with the political framing of this and the political impact of this, and not
right now
moral implications.
Yeah, when I did my episode on, like, I keep on talking about the episode Felix of Post Platonic, highly recommended. That was me caring long term, which I do care long term, about the framing of World War II. And I think this entire framing of one man was a psychopath, the other was a saint, like, it's obviously silly. Like, Churchill was no saint, that's obvious. Hitler was definitely not a saint, that's obvious.
Well, not at the end, but again, in the beginning, that's a much harder case to make. Saving millions of people from starvation is.
I don't think he saved so many people. But look, the fact is, we are due to revisit. We are at a Kyrios moment. We are at a chiral moment, right? Sure. As Vervaeke and Pajot constantly say, and I think PBK is admitting more than he used to. and Peterson is saying, right? We are at a time when there's a confluence of many different things. I'm not going to reduce it to any one thing, but it certainly does include the internet, right? Many different things are happening which are very much changing our world, and not least of which is the fact that, yes, you're right. We could go all the way back to the French Revolution, and frankly, we could go all the way back to the Enlightenment and say we have reached a place where this long arc is falling apart, right?
Yeah.
So it really it's a question of which level of analysis you want to talk about, right?
Well, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, as I was listening to what you were saying, I was like, okay, he wants to talk at the level of analysis of actual what was the history of Germany. Like, okay, we can talk about the Great War, or we can talk about the history of Europe, or we like at what level of history are you going to talk?
Right, but this is where it gets back to the Vervaeke question of relevance realization, which I think actually Peterson has the same question, and then I always have a question in my mind as to who came first. But anyway,
right,
right. What's the relevant frame that explains the behavior of both men? Now we're like, all right, I would love to hear something that isn't historical, going back to at least Napoleon, that explains the behavior of Churchill and Hitler.
If you're asking me what the frame is, I think the frame is how you understand the Book of Romans by Paul of Tarsus.
You're definitely going to have to go into that, because I don't.
Right. So in the Book of Romans, Paul is talking about the relationship between the Jews and the Gentiles, and how the church views itself, and how the church views the Jews, right? And that is the thread of history all the way to today. Like, who do you think Israel is? Who do you think the Jews are? Who do you think the church is? Right? And based on that view, you are going to have a very conflicting view of the arc of humanity. Right?
I'm going to be the third opinion here.
Yeah.
And say that the growing up Lutheran / non-denom, we didn't really focus too much on the Jews. And most of it was just like, yeah, they got it wrong, and here's what we believe. And sure, yeah, that affects your theology. Like heresy, how do you say? Heresiology affects your theology. But most of heresiology is ignoring what the heretics say. You know what I mean?
But you have to realize you grew up in a Lutheran church after World War II, when the Lutheran church is very much trying to live up and repent of Martin Luther and his anti-Semitism.
That's true.
That certainly affects how you were raised in your Lutheran church.
But more importantly, the view of Jews in the European countries, and the view of Jews in England, and the view of Jews in the United States there's almost no overlap, right? Except where that view has been brought over by the migrants. And that's what changes everything. So if you're going to look at that time scale, I would suggest two things. First is, it didn't have to be the Jews. That would be my argument. Now, you could say there was no better group, or whatever. There's lots of arguments as well. It would inevitably be the Jews. I can't argue against that. I'm saying that any group would have worked to cast the spell that he cast.
The story of Jew and Gentile is too formational to Western society for it to have been anything.
And that's fine. And I would say, if you want to use sort of the long history play at the religious layer, and that's totally fair. I'm not even pushing back on that. It's probably correct. I don't play in that space at all. Right. Theology is not my thing, even a little bit. that pattern is repeated more proximally, and I would argue, maybe incorrectly, more clearly, with things like Napoleon and the French Revolution, which is the same pattern, and that pattern continues, right? And then there's the mini cycles. Look up Elliott wave theory. It's not real, but it's real fun, that's for sure. So there's the mini cycles that continue, but then there's the larger arc. And then if you continue along that arc, you kind of realize, oh, well, we know exactly what's happening here. And that is actually why I think they split it up into World War I and World War II. Right? Because they didn't want to see it as a continuation. They wanted to see it as a break. But that's the materialism. That's the cause. The cause of World War I, technically, is contract law. Technically, right? And the solution to World War I that caused World War II, so it wasn't a solution, is contract law. It's a treaty. It's the Treaty of Versailles. And so it's like, well, we did this trick once and it resulted in a huge battle. And then we did the trick again to end the huge battle and it resulted in a battle. And it's like, are you going to learn or are you going to do it again? This isn't the way these things need to work. And it's classically, historically, not how they've ever worked. So maybe don't do that. I don't know. Right. And again, like
that's a very interesting way of putting it. But to put it back into the Book of Romans frame, and I really do think how you interpret specifically chapter 10 of Romans has, like, as opposed to talking about contract law, you could talk about covenants, which there's a lot there. And
contract law is a compression of a covenant down to a propositional document.
Right. I mean, the exact difference between a covenant and a contract we can get into.
So Jacob, I don't have that frame. So right. So why don't you explain to me what the two interpretations are?
So the story of the Book of Romans is that Paul is writing to the church in Rome, where apparently there is a fight between the Jewish Christians and the Gentile Christians, right? And he's trying to explain the relationship between the Jewish Christians and the Gentile Christians. Now, I am not going to give you one way of understanding what he says about Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians. You can listen to Paul Vanderklay. He did a whole series. It's one of his most popular series. You can listen to any number of Christians telling you absolutely opposite ways of understanding.
Sure. I just want your frame. Just give me the split. Just give me the split.
Well, the split is, okay, did God, like, are the covenants of God irrevocable? And Paul says, no, the covenants of God are not irrevocable. What happens if the Jews do not keep their part of the contract, right? And how a Christian is to view, right, this relationship between Jew and Gentile, Jewish Christian even, and Gentile Christian, but also non-Christian Jews and Gentiles, right? And this conflict has been playing itself over and over again in manifesting in all Western civilization, all Christian societies, and I would say even Muslim societies over the past 2,000 years.
So wait, how does that play out? Like, what are the two ways of interpreting?
Okay, so the British had a view of interpreting it, which is the promise of God to Israel is permanent. It will not go away, to the point where you have the British Hebrews and British Israelites claiming descent from Israel, right? And that's That's why they were so Zionist. They had this idea, oh, the Jews are going to go back to Israel. That's when they're going to accept Jesus. That's when the apocalypse will happen, right? And
Okay.
this is
Okay.
very old in Christian belief, very old in Christian belief. I mean,
Okay.
in British belief, right?
Mhm.
Certainly hundreds, possibly thousands of years. Whereas the Lutheran belief was no, the Jews have been, they've broken the contract with God. They are hated of God, right? And
I see.
And we must in
so
fact destroy them. Which
you're
is what
linking that
Luther
to the.
said.
I see what you're doing. You're linking it to the Zionism, and you're justifying Churchill's alleged Zionism through that theological. I see what you're saying. I wasn't familiar with any of this. This is all new
Right.
stuff. So this is helpful. Thank you.
So look, the fact is, you can tell this story in so many different ways. I could tell the story in so many different ways.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
The question becomes, which narrative is our society going? And that's my question. Like, which narrative? I could tell very different stories.
Yeah.
But I ultimately always go back to the Bible, because I think it is what we have most in common, right? Like, you're going to get Christians and the Christian world to try to understand the book of Romans much more easily than you're going to get them to try to understand the life of Napoleon.
I don't think Christians and Christianity exists. I think it's bad, very bad framing. Because there's a fundamental difference between what are we going with? Anglo-Cathodoxy and everybody else, right? Which is belief in, a divine feminine archetype, which is belief in Mary, the liturgy, the symbolism, the tradition. There's one other thing, and I can't remember it. Like those things are fundamentally missing, and I think the Catholics and the Orthodox and the Anglicans and maybe even the Lutherans, I don't know, do themselves a disservice when they lower themselves to just follow.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I mean, I'm not even getting into the intramural, but all Christians have to have an interpretation of Romans.
Yeah,
but Romans is in the Bible of all of them.
But Jacob, I think either one of those is completely ridiculous and wrong. But only because this is the evangelical argument. Like, and I ran into this like maybe 20 years ago, I forget. But I was watching some late night TV, and they used to do this advertisement about, give some money to send a Jew to Israel. And I was like, I mean, sure, maybe whatever, like, sure, help people. That's fine. Like, whatever. But I was like, who are these people and why are they giving this message? And what is really the message? Because they're evangelicals, right? So they're Protestants. And the reason why they want to do this is because they want to bring out about the end times. Like, that's like,
right. So you're thinking specifically of dispensationalists, which are very prominent within evangelical Christianity. I'm not sure their roots are as deep as they appear on the surface.
No, they don't have any roots. This is all Protestantism.
No. Even within Protestantism, I don't believe that they're actually as...
there are no Protestant denominations with roots. This is a point I've made over and over again, that none of them seem able to counter. So it's a pretty good bet that there aren't any. That's the missing tradition, right? Nothing they do lasts a generation or much more than a generation. And so what ends up happening is, like, if you talk like that to a Catholic, like, oh, the rapture is going to happen as soon as the Jews go back, which is one faction. It's not the only faction sponsoring this, but it's one faction. Those are the more hardcore crazies. Catholics would just look at you like you had 2 or perhaps 3 heads and pray for you. Like, they don't understand any of that frame, like, at all. They're like, what do you mean the Jews returning to Israel? where is that? They would be like, where the hell is that? That's we don't understand
I mean, the fact is, I think Catholicism, with the reconstituting of the state of Israel, Catholicism is having to deal with that question. The trad caths have started wrestling. So the Society of St. Pius X, have you heard of them? They're the Latin Mass people.
SSPX.
SSPX. They're the Latin Mass people. They're
okay. Yeah.
They were actually very, very involved in like Holocaust denial, etc. Like back in the 80s.
Really?
70s and 80s. Right. Yeah. And so there's again, like the story runs really, really deep. The symbolic vocabulary is just throughout Christianity, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I think it's bubbling up now because we're having to reframe. How are we telling this story? What is our narrative? What is the arc of history? Right.
Sure. So let me shoot this at you, Jacob, and see if we can find some common understanding here. So the Catholics have lots of problems, right? One of them is they don't seem to realize, or at least some of them. I mean, Monsignor Shea, he's great. He understands. He wrote a book about this. They don't seem to understand that Christendom is gone. Like it's been disintegrated. So the result of Christendom being gone is the collapse of all the European nations, roughly speaking. Like those two are the same event, right? There's no right because and we can put this totally back in the postmodern frame. Not that there's any redemption for postmoderns. There's nothing but evil there. But like that's the grand narrative, right? And so when the grand narrative is not, we'll say the Catholic or Cathodox grand narrative anymore, then we start to have problems. Now, obviously, these take hundreds of years, right? 300 years, 400 years, I don't know, to unfold, right? But that's not a bad way to understand things, right? Because one of the and what fuels this on, especially with, we'll say, the corruption of the Catholic ethos, which I think is a totally fair way to think about it, is exactly what I was hit by, which is when you try to teach history without teaching the religion behind all the actions, you cannot understand it. It's not possible. All the actions in the world are effectively either the result of a desperate, group of people who the only thing they have in common is starvation or something, right? Or lack of resource, or religion. It's a religious belief, right? And once you re-inject that into the historical understanding, now all of a sudden the world makes sense. All the wars make sense. All of these egregore things, right? Spirits start to become clearer, right? And then you see the enchantment, like, well, because you can look at something like the Crusades and say, well, it was just Philip I saying, I got to get rid of these rabble-rousing, troublemaking Southern French people with large enough armies that they could overthrow my rule, and therefore I'll convince the Pope to save Jerusalem or something goofy. That was a factor, right? But that wasn't the reason, right? So there's a lot of narratives you can tell, but you really need to understand. No. The protection of Christendom. That's why the Crusades happened, and that's actually important. And the fact that they failed is actually the beginning of the end to some extent. Of the nations of Europe.
So the reason I pulled up this picture, I could have also pulled up the picture of Francis washing the feet of 12 Muslims. Two pictures which were incredibly controversial within Catholic circles, caused lots of controversy, which in a very real sense, I would say, are depicting what you're talking about. So in this picture, the Archbishop of Canterbury is blessing Pope Francis.
Yeah.
And and the traditionalist Catholics lost their mind, right?
They should. Yeah.
Why like it's the inversion, right?
Right.
Of who the Pope is supposed to be.
Exactly. No,
Right.
it's a destruction of the hierarchy because Francis seems bent on making the Westminster Confessional true. I don't know why. Like, what do you want me to say? Like, yeah, the Catholics got big problems, and if you can't see that, it's obvious now. I mean, my goodness, like, yeah. But Bishop Barron, to some extent, I didn't see the latest thing, but I have it on good authority that he's sort of come around. More to say in the Peterson sphere with the language, which is really important. Like, that was his big problem, was Sunnum Bonum. It's like, I don't even know what you're saying, dude. Just stop. Like, I know Latin and I know exactly what that means in Latin, but I don't know how you're using it, right? Just stop. And Monsignor Shea, who From Christendom to Apostolic Mission, I think is the book that he wrote, although I don't think his name's on it. And he's got some great videos on this eye blindness or something, I think is in the title of one of his talks. But like he understands this, like, oh, Christendom collapsed, we need to move to an apostolic model as Catholics, like which has been
I don't know who Monsignor Shea is, but I will say the fact he's a Monsignor and not a Cardinal, right? Like that already tells me something about his stature within the Catholic Church.
Maybe. I mean, it's hard to tell with these things because people are going through things, and so maybe you
right. And that's right. Why I mean I really do tend to work on a different level of analysis than I often see you working, because I see multiple narratives that could be told that people may adhere to. And right. I often hear from you a particular narrative, and what I like about you is the narrative you are hammering through. It is a viable narrative, right? As opposed to the people who bother with not viable narratives. Now, that doesn't mean I agree with your propositions or like the presuppositions, not propositions. Sure. With your presuppositions, etc. In fact, there's a lot of ways in which I think we do disagree in presuppositions mostly. But you represent actually hammering out a viable narrative, which that's what we have to do, because without a viable narrative, I would say is like an operating system.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
And there are computers running Windows and Linux and other flavors of shit and Temple OS and right.
Sure.
And
good reference.
What bothers me is there are people who seem to be running not viable narratives, which are like blue screen of death OSs constantly.
Or just pure viruses that run on your machine.
And if the OS you're running, which unfortunately I would say anybody who, for example, would vote for Kamala Harris is running an OS,
they're broken.
Yeah. That's just completely broken.
Yeah. No. I mean, on that we agree. I mean, and thank you for the kind words and the explanation. I'm always struggling to get people to give me good feedback. So that was very good feedback. I appreciate it. Like the thing that I like about you is you're really good at spotting good and evil, and just just going, no, it's evil, bang. That's super helpful. I mean, that's my thing, right? Like I think Chris Petkow unfortunately took it down, but like. That was one of the things I talked about with him. Like, call out evil even if you do it poorly. Like, you're better off calling out evil and getting it wrong every once in a while because, well, you can learn from that anyway. Then you are not saying anything.
Right. So if you never have any like the easiest way never to have a false positive is to always come up with negatives. Like if the answer to every time you test is negative, right? Then you will never have a false positive.
Right.
And there are people whose entire like ethos, their telos, is to have 0 false positives.
Yep.
And that's very easy to do.
Right.
All you have to do is be winsome. You will have 0
Exactly.
false positives.
Exactly. Well, and the way I like to talk about it is, you know, the important thing to know is that your ability to judge a good narrative from a bad narrative, if you want to put it that, I would say story, but whatever, it's the same thing at some point, right, is super important. And that's what you should focus on. But what people are focused on, because of the postmodernism, right, to be fair, the postmodern pure evil, because there's no redeeming that at all, they think they can do it. They think they can come up with their own story. I'm like, you would be lucky to tell the good story from the bad story. And so one of the things that helps with that is having multiple tools. And so this is my continual argument against, you know, the very sweet, very good, and very good faith people that I get to talk to on my Discord all the time who are Protestants, is you guys just don't have the same number of tools. Like, you can say what you want about the viability of your tools, and I'm not going to disagree, except with confessionalism. I think that's dumb, right? But like, there's just more tools in the Anglo-Catholic sphere, right? Because they have the symbolism, they have the tradition, they have the things outside of the Bible, they have the liturgy, they have the hierarchy. These are all really important extra tools. But the problem is, you know, people have to buy in. And if you think you can write your own damn story, and people like, you know, where does transgenderism come from? You think you can write your own story and write yourself as a character in that story. And if you're the author of your own character that is you, of course I'm a pregnant woman. And give me the money, you bigot.
So I had a series, Why is Protestant Theology So Bad? And the answer of why is Protestant theology so bad was because it's one person sitting there trying to do theology by himself.
Yeah. No, we're in complete agreement. I wish you
what will
do
never
that.
happen. What will never happen is that one person sitting there doing theology by himself will compare to thousands of people doing theology for thousands of years. That just there's no comparison.
I would say there's two different disambiguable arguments there, Jacob. I would say the first and easiest argument for me, the one that I've had a lot of success with, is the Bible, like, however you want to frame the Bible, is really not relevant at some point. The Bible's much smarter than you are, and you're never going to understand it by yourself. You have no hope, right? But then the second frame, which is more along the lines of what you were talking about, this is where I think John Vervaeke went horrifically wrong, like really badly. I feel really bad for him. He talks about distributed cognition, not his idea, right? But he talks about it. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't seem to understand, if distributed cognition is a thing, distributed cognition through time must be a thing. And the implication of that, you know, is that the Bible
you should not create your own religion.
No, it's worse. The Bible is the smartest book that's ever been written. So you can, all the other books that may be older, whatever, right? Like you can, I mean, look, you can grab this, and like, I don't know if people just haven't read it or if they have low reading comprehension. This book does not say any of the things people tell you, like 0 of them. The Plato's Cave thing is nonsense. I have a video on that, on navigating patterns. Like, I just totally dispel it. I bring all the goods. I use all the little references right from the book, right? But more importantly, and I haven't done this video yet. I keep telling myself I'm gonna, but it's a hell of a lot of work to go through the stupid book. And I did not read that book on my own. Like, I didn't even attempt to read it alone. I read it as part of a book club on the Texas Wisdom Community YouTube channel. So if you want to see that, it's there. The end of the Republic is a story. There's no commentary after the story, right? So there's a double quote, and the end of the book is the end of the double quote of the story. The story is a story about a resurrection. You would think that people would like highlight that as important, given the time frame that it happened in and who wrote the book. And I've never heard that before. And I will tell you, sir, I was plenty pissed about Plato's Cave, which is book 7, and the middle of book 8, which basically describes what we're going through now, which is democracy into tyranny. Like Plato already wrote about it. The pattern's right there. You just read about it. I don't know why these so-called philosophers who so-called read this book are not telling you this. Like, I find that criminally intellectually dishonest. Like, jail people, I'm not joking. Like, this is, you read this and this doesn't seem important to you. I do have that video. But like, then you're telling me you're looking for answers or what comes next after Plato or whatever. And it's the story of a resurrection, and it hasn't occurred to you that maybe that might be relevant to what we're going through, and the idea that then it kind of happens, not the way it's in the story, fair, but like the indication from the end of book 10 is that the proper way to integrate Homer and Plato, which is basically what he's doing. He doesn't say no to Homer. People that tell you that are lying. It's explicit in the book that he's not doing that. It's not to say he doesn't use that in the book. He says, we have to throw out Homer, and then he redeems Homer effectively. And then he ends the book with a Homeric tale. Might be a hint that he's not against Homer, right? But like, that integration is the story of a resurrection. I don't even like the import of that to me is just so monumental. It's like, I mean, it just justifies the whole later resurrection story. Like, even Plato thought the resurrection story was the answer to justice, which is the topic of the Republic, right? Well, don't you think that would be important to let people know? I would think that would be important, instead of this garbage idea that the allegory of the cave has something to do with individuals, which it most certainly does not. Some way to escape from the cave, which Plato says is impossible in the book, or at least implies can't be done. And all this other individualistic nonsense, when the allegory of the cave is just about education and the want of education. That's a quote from the beginning, before the allegory begins. Right? So I don't know why people are doing this nonsense with Plato in particular. I'm like, if you're taking this seriously, why are you lying about what Plato? Because you're lying about what Plato says. You're flat out lying. See my Lies of Plato's Cave video, right? Like, it's right there. I bring the goods. It's definitely a lie. So you're right. Like, there's all these bad quote narratives or stories going around. What do we do about that? Well, the problem is we've been told we can write our own stories. So like, yeah, what do we do about that? Well, I've always tried to tell people, no, we have better stories already, and you can just engage with them. And that's why I like Jonathan Peugeot redoing fairy tales, because that's certainly one way, and it's not a bad way. My problem with that, and I'm not saying he shouldn't do that, whatever, he should do that for sure. My problem is that doesn't help the meaning crisis people, because the meaning crisis people cannot engage, even if they would, with fairy tales. And if you get them to engage with the fairy tale, it won't help them at all. They'll just, it'll bounce right off of it.
Okay, so there is no such thing as a new story, because if you were to tell a story that was completely new, nobody would be able to understand you.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Right.
What there is people either knowingly plagiarizing, which I highly recommend, or people unknowingly plagiarizing, which can also be very good, right? Because sometimes you haven't had access to the story, like something is lost in a library somewhere, and it may be useful, right? I don't have any problems with people trying to innovate, because as long as we are not being stupid, right? Like, there are people generating signal, there are people generating noise, and as long as you have a hierarchy that amplifies signal and dilutes noise, right?
Filters.
Then you're fine.
Yeah, if you have a good filter, but
Right.
then you have to acquiesce to an imperfect filter because none of them are perfect, and
And
that's always where the
nothing-
problem
yeah,
comes.
we live in a world of imperfection. Like if you're looking for perfection, you're not going. The ideal is not in this world.
Right.
Right.
So Jacob, right. And here's right. And it's well said. Right. So what I usually do is here I invoke my good friend Bruce, who would be shocked, I tell you, shocked to realize we live in a quote fallen world or imperfect world. Right. This is a joke.
Bruce the Calvinist.
obviously.
Yes.
Yeah, he knows full well that we do, right? But also that we're imperfect people. And those are the two messages that are most missing in the world that we need to put out in order to help repair things, because people have an idea that they can write their own story, and that's why there's so much nonsense going on. Like who writes a story where, because of the story that's unfolded so far, everything they could possibly say technically is now going to contradict a previous statement? Possibly say, like, there's Kamala can't say anything that won't contradict a previous statement anymore, because she's built a small closed world and she's already set the boundaries. So now she just has to contradict herself, and that's why she keeps getting caught contradicting. Tim Walz is the same way, right?
And that's why she doesn't speak. Like, she hasn't done an interview.
And they should not let her talk. She would not have lost.
So it actually looks like we might not. So we were planning on watching the debate, but Trey isn't going to be there. It looks like several people are not going to be there, so we might not end up not watching the debate. And frankly, I don't need to watch the debate.
Yeah.
I want to see what happens with the debate, which I don't know what will happen with the debate. Because
it's not predictable at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, especially since Tulsi Gabbard absolutely destroyed Kamala in a debate that too few people watched.
Right.
And
it's not hard.
I don't know.
But debates don't break enchantment.
Plagiarizes that attack, which I'm guessing he will. I don't know how Kamala is going to respond.
Yeah, but debates don't break enchantment. Like, at this point, if you're voting for her, a debate is not going to change your mind.
What? But the Biden debate kind of did.
I don't think so. I think what actually happens is the pollsters have more access to better data directly after a debate.
Okay.
Because if you watch carefully, this isn't true anymore. I totally get that. Like, the world has changed in the past, like 7, 8, 10 years, something like that. In the past, what would happen very clearly, and you can go back and look, like, you look at the sample sizes and what was going on, and you realize the number of respondents on polls just goes way up after debate. And that's just a function of attention, because Jonathan Peugeot's right. The world is attention. And so what actually happens is the hardcore people are of the same size in both parties, roughly speaking. And you know this just by looking at the damn voter rolls, right? Almost everybody's, registered independent, but there's almost always more Republicans than Democrats, and there always has been. Registered Republicans versus registered Democrats in every state. It's almost always been that way, right? Nobody knows that. So really, the noise is the independent registrations, and that's the bulk of the voters. Fair enough, whatever. But like, what happens is when you look at response rates in polls, as you get higher response rates, you get just basic, Claude Shannon data science, right, or information theory, which leads to data science. You're going to get cleaner numbers. Well, every time you get cleaner numbers, like, the truth gets revealed. That doesn't mean there was a change, because the change is in the response rate, not in the responses, right? And so in other words, you can do crazy things, like you can map the amount, because usually it's close, but maybe the Republicans are 2 points higher. And then when the debate happens, that ratio doesn't change, but of course the numbers do. Right, because the response rates usually double or triple or things like it gets crazy. or it used to. Again, I don't know the past 8 years, 10 years, whatever. I don't know how it's changed, but it used to be very clear as day. You just get a better sample. And when you get a better sample, you just get better data. And so I don't think the debates change anybody's mind. And the more I talk to people, people just like, oh, so-and-so definitely won that debate. And I'm like, you have to be on some kind of medication I'm not aware of. Like you have to be.
Hold
like,
on.
I mean, sometimes these people are like, no.
But you're saying people who weren't previously paying attention pay attention during a debate.
No, I'm saying people who previously don't answer polls will now answer polls. It's not even necessary. I mean, that is a factor too, but I suspect that's a minor factor. The factor that I traced down when I was doing the data science work for this on my own was that people are just more likely, like in other words, there's definitely 100% askew, right? Conservatives are more likely to answer polls only when they think it matters. And they will not think a poll that happens outside of a debate will matter, with very few. There's a few points where they think polls matter, and they will not answer the polls in between those events ever. And that might be the majority of Republicans. And in other words, all sampling on interim polls is almost certainly skewed Democrat and almost certainly completely wrong. And if you want evidence for that, it's the first Trump election.
I have two questions.
Sure.
One, do you believe, if everybody's mind is made up, do you believe that people do change their mind like at all during that election time?
No, I don't think everybody's mind is made up, but I think at this point, the argument I would make is that the debate is not going to increase the visibility of either candidate at all.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
because we've just had too much news. So
a lot of candidates still don't know Harris at all. A lot of people
I don't
have no idea who Kamala Harris is.
Maybe, but the only joy I get in my life right now when I watch YouTube is that they are pushing the please donate to Kamala Harris campaign ads. And I'm like, it's more than 50% of all the ads I was seeing in the past 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that.
Right.
I mean, it's obvious that they're just spending enormous amounts of money on advertising. And occasionally one of the ads.
Well, you're in a swing state.
South Carolina is not a swing state. Not even
It
close.
isn't?
South Carolina is ridiculously Republican.
I'm thinking of North Carolina.
Insanely. Yeah. No, there's no swinging here. North Carolina, yes, not South Carolina. But
South Carolina is not solid red. It is red, but it's not solid.
It also ain't swing. Trust me.
Yeah, it's not one of the swing states. Correct.
We still had voting machines, so that's all I
both
gotta
Georgia and North Carolina are swing states, though.
Okay, Georgia was also not a swing state. I don't know if you saw the citizens came out on the front steps of the election committee building and said, "We, the people of Georgia, owe Donald Trump an apology."
Right now, I mean, 270 to win has Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin as toss-ups.
We already know why he's wrong and that he's wrong. So sure, I agree that the polling is, but you'll also notice that same polling, Kamala dove when she started talking publicly, like the CNN.
Right. No, and that's what I think is
their lead.
I think as people get to know her more, they will. I think.
Yeah, I get that. I get that that's your read, but I don't see that. And there's some of that for sure, right? I'm not, but I think it's a small percentage. I think more likely what happens is because she's already had the exposure, because of these ads, people have already shied away from her, right? And then you have the panic crew like the Weinsteins who are they're just noticing now again This happened before the last 6 months before the last election. They just clued in at the last minute. I think it's a pattern, right? Like they're just figuring out, oh wait, there's something wrong here. Really?
Well, I mean, this is the first time they seem to they're like reluctantly endorsing voting Trump. They didn't do that in 2020.
I agree. They instead in 6 months tried to start a new political party and get someone new on the ballot.
Eric was not involved in that. That was Brett.
That's fair. He also didn't tap his brother on the shoulder and say, "Bro, you're 2 years too late to try to start that."
That's not the type of relationship they have.
Maybe not, but yeah, I mean, I was just like, man, I mean, there's Clueless, and then there's whatever the hell that is. Like,
I mean,
you can't even
Brett
get
and
somebody on
Eric.
the
I
ballot.
am definitely an Eric fan. There's no,
Yeah. But like, yeah, that was just silliness. But like, it's the same pattern. I agree. They've gone further away from the evil left, but not far enough, in my opinion. But whatever, it's better than nothing. I
am not sure I would prefer for Brett Weinstein to be more, because he is actually able to pull people away who, with the way he's speaking, who would never go for a full-throated endorsement of Trump.
Maybe. I mean, I'm not going to criticize on that front. I'm just saying, like, still trapped in the leftism, right?
Yeah.
Which has been failing consistently since JFK, so for a while now. Yes, couple 3 years, right? And
we are not going to get a new formulation of the left until the Democrats are soundly defeated.
Yeah, if the left can ever have a formulation, because this is I think they just identify against.
Well, whatever you call left, it doesn't matter. A system with at least two parties, a one-party system just doesn't work.
Yeah, one-party system can't work, and a four-party system can't work. A three-party system kind of works.
Maybe, yeah.
Ross Perot.
A two-party system is fine. We can manage with it, but that's like the minimum.
Yeah.
And so I think it will eventually, we will have whatever you want to call the second party. That's going to exist.
Well, I think we have to have the first party first.
Well,
I mean, this depends on how you read Trump. I mean, the reason why Trump got completely shellacked with his attempts to very rightly question some of the very questionable election results is because the conservative Republicans don't like him because he's a left-leaning moderate, which he's always been. Like, he's a Bill Clinton Democrat who disagrees with Bill Clinton on China and trade, which he said in, and
look, it's taken a good 8 years for Donald Trump to take over the Republican Party.
He's the most consistent elected official in the history of the freaking world, and everyone's losing their minds. I'm like, and he's a leftist. Like, what is going on?
Well,
right?
I mean, if you saw the response to the Republican platform that the pro life lobby had, I don't know if you're aware, they lost their mind and they were like, well, we won't vote for Trump, and there were definitely, especially evangelical Christians, who were complaining about Trump being. You mean he's not totally against abortion? Shocking.
Yeah. He's not a conservative, right? No, he's a left-leaning moderate. He always was. He always will have been.
Yeah, no, I mean,
he's Bill Clinton. He's Bill Clinton with two upgrades. Which I'm like, I'm okay with that. I didn't like Bill Clinton one little bit, but like, I'm okay with Bill Clinton with those two upgrades. Actually, that actually is my line. Like, sure. I'm
not a fan of Trump, but it doesn't matter, because when right now the choice is between Trump and Harris, that's the choice.
Well,
like,
the choice.
Anybody who talks about anything else than those Like you can go ahead and not vote.
The choice, and this is why I have a video on this, the culture war, right? The best way to understand the culture war is the same way to understand this election. It's the choice between order and chaos, just like Peterson talks about. Right? The culture war is the choice between having any kind of culture at all and any one of the factions that will lead to having no culture at all. And then that's the way to understand the culture war. It's not a fight of equals at the bottom or any of that. It's like, if you want a culture, you can't have these little fights at the bottom over, these little tiny issues that wouldn't replace culture, but require its destruction. Like, you can't do that. That's what the culture war really is in my framing. And then once you understand that, it's like, well, yeah, now we're back to Peterson, right? Because chaos and order are not opposites in any way, shape, or form. That isn't true. And this is, again, where people get confused. They try to, well, both sides do. That's just false. This is all false. It's very asymmetrical. The side of order takes a lot of effort. The order takes effort to maintain and to create, right? Or to manifest. And then chaos, any idiot can create chaos, right? Like, any idiot can crash a plane into a freaking building. Like, that's not hard. How many people did it take to build the building? Well, that's hard to build the building, right? And it's that asymmetry that people keep missing, because we're trying to do this equality doctrine, this lowering, like everything's equal, everything's not equal, right? Like there's a lot of things, Jacob, that you can do and that and that you see that I can't do. And I'm grateful for that. Like, I don't want to be equal to you in those ways. And I don't think you should be equal to me in the ways that we're not equal. I think it's fine. Like, I think that's the enchanted world. That's what makes a better world right there.
Yeah. No, I mean, 1 Corinthians 12, which I'm guessing you don't know, talks about a body having different organs. And if all be the ear, then where be the seeing? And if all be the eye, where be the hearing? Mm-hmm. From my favorite author of the Christian Bible, Paul of Tarsus. Yeah.
Oh, and you're calling him Paul now. Oh, he's upgraded. Paul. I never know where you stand with him, because sometimes he's.
No, he's definitely Paul of Tarsus. That's
okay.
Sure.
Okay.
But like sometimes I have to say Paul of Tarsus so people know which one I'm talking about.
Oh, okay, fair. I can't keep track.
And I was pretending like I was like, he's my favorite, right? So when I say he's my favorite,
fair.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think that the big problem is if you don't understand the cost of order, the trade-off, what has to be done.
So this is the main problem I have. Like, so I jokingly say we need to get rid of birthright citizenship, as in you should not be allowed to be a citizen of the United States if you were born here.
Right.
The only people, like, if you want to be a citizen, you have to leave the country, go live somewhere else for at least 10 years, and then apply to come live here, because like you need to know what it's like to live in a shithole country.
I get your theory. I think 10 years is a bit much, but I understand you and appreciate your theory. And
have you heard my greatest modest proposal?
No, go ahead. Lay it on.
It's completely off the scales, but it's my favorite modest proposal.
Sure.
All marriages should have 10-year term limits, because it's not fair. Like, all the good people are married to each other, right? So like, if you like, okay, you had 10 years, and then you have to get divorced and go marry somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And that way you spread out the capacity to have good relationships.
The good relationships. Yeah. That.
Don't you think that's a wonderful idea?
Look, Jacob, I'm not going to promulgate those ideas. However, if you got them up for a vote, I would probably vote for them. Just don't tell me.
Yeah, this is my favorite. This is my favorite modest proposal.
It's a good one. It's a good one. It's right up my alley. Yes. Well, I've got mine. One of my things is I think we should pass a law that says if you have 4 bedrooms or less in a house, you're only allowed to have 1 bathroom. Right? Because that would force people to learn how to freaking cooperate. And I think the real poison of the world, honestly, for me.
Well, no, then you would end up with a lot of 1 bedroom, 1 baths.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I actually like I've become a lot yeah. The fact is I can sound like a commie. I definitely can. And I would like to be able to go back to being a leftist, because what I've realized is that I am in no way conservative. Yeah, I just live in an insane world where to not be a conservative is insane.
Right, but communism is appropriate at the family level. Like, people always forget that. Like, communism isn't wrong. Marx wasn't wrong until he applied a thing that works at this level to a level or 2 up. Then he was completely wrong because it doesn't work that way at scale. But Marx is a bit of a retard, and I mean that. Well, and so he didn't understand scale, right?
I don't know how much you've looked into the life of Marx and Engels. I am pretty convinced.
I can't. Every time I start, I'm like, anybody ever listen to these 2 idiots argue? Because once you hear about their lives, you're like, well, of course they're evil. Duh.
Without Engels, I don't think Marx would have achieved anything.
He wouldn't have achieved anything. Engels did all the work.
He was so incompetent in every aspect of his life.
Yeah, but to be fair, he wasn't just incompetent. He was a complete loser. Like, man, he takes loserdom to the next level.
Fortunes he spent, vast fortunes. Right.
Well,
yeah.
Destroyed. Single-handedly destroyed.
Yeah.
But like when Peterson did that interview with that guy who wrote the freaking book, and the guy goes, here's a letter from his father when he was 17 or 18 or whatever it was, basically saying, son, I think you're possessed by a evil demon. I'm like, dude, why do you need more information about this guy? Like, if your father writes you a letter that says that, you don't need to go any further in the thought of that person. I don't even know why you would. I think, what are you thinking? Like, why are you doing this? It's sort of like walking past the gates of hell and going, oh, I wonder what it's like. And no one does that. Everybody goes, oh, I don't want to go there. I think I'll keep walking, or I'll backtrack. And everybody's like, ooh, Karl Marx. And I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. It's so obvious that all of his thought is bankrupt and evil. And you guys just keep giving him any credit at all, when if you just listen, I'm not joking, listen to a 3, 4, or 5-year-old. And I am not joking, you will regularly hear them quote Karl Marx and Stalin all over the place. And I know for a fact they haven't read them. That should tell you something about the level of their thought and how sophisticated it is. And for some reason, people don't get it. I'm like, how is everybody so enchanted by these idiots?
Part of the problem, I really do think, is that we don't distinguish between bad ideas. Like, this is why I say the comedians will save us. Sometimes I say the artists will save us, and sometimes I say the comedians will save us. I think both of them are possibilities, but ridicule and shaming of bad ideas is necessary.
Well, we need to see bad ideas, and we're not giving negative signals in the world, which like, this is what puzzles me. Anybody who's actually studied, and like, I can't credit Brett Weinstein for actually studying this, actually studies evolution, realizes it's like, I've done evolutionary simulations on a computer, many of them from scratch, built by hand from scratch in various programming languages. It's not that hard, right? Well, not for me, but like, and Dawkins did this too. He wrote about it in The Blind Watchman. He just got the wrong lessons. And if you read it carefully, you'll get the right lessons and you'll realize where you went horribly wrong. Like, you only need a negative signal, but you need the negative signal. You know what you don't need? You don't need the positive signal. And this belief that you need the positive signal comes from B.F. Skinner, who tried to prove that you could do positive only reinforcement and get a better society. And he failed. And his protege tried, and he failed. And his son tried, and he failed. That should be a hint, and it's not a hint. Now, B.F. Skinner did wonderful things in psychology. Most of his other work is excellent, and that part of his work is so dumb and so bankrupt. And this idea of positive signaling is so denial of evolution and evolutionary theory. All of Darwin's theories collapse if you don't have negative signals. And we have removed negative signals from the world. Well, what did you think was going to happen? Because you need that exemplification. This is where Girard comes in handy. Like the mimicry of desire, right? Like that actually, like this mimicry idea, that's actually really important. But if you don't have somebody showing you the negative signals, you won't be able to identify them. Also, if you're trying to do that on your own, that's a problem. Now, fair, if you outsource it to someone else and they screw up, you're in the boat with them. Like, I get it. Also, it's not really optional. There are a bunch of things you have to outsource, right? What do you say? You have to outsource your cognition, whatever, right? Don't think alone.
We have to secure distributed cognition.
Yeah. But you tell people don't try to think for yourself, right?
Don't think for yourself.
Right.
I'm not telling you don't think, but don't think for yourself. Don't think by yourself. Don't think only about yourself. Like,
right. Yeah. Don't try to read Plato's Republic by yourself. Like, it's too deep a book. You'll miss most of it.
Don't worry. I have no intention of reading Plato at all.
You can read it with the Texas Wisdom Community Book Club on that playlist on YouTube. That'll be fun. But like, we don't have that sense. We're all trying to be individuals, and so we're all told the postmodern we can write our own story. So we're all rejecting, to the earlier point that was brought up, we're all rejecting the wisdom of the elders who say, no, really, this always leads to a bad thing. And because we don't see it in the moment, oh, you know what, this bathroom thing, whatever, we can let these bathroom things slide. And then, 8 years later, 9 years, when was the dust up in North Carolina? I forget. It was probably 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh, the transgender bathrooms. Okay.
Right. But that was the first place it really blew up. We'll say nationally, it was in North Carolina. And then like it seemed like a minor thing to a lot of people. I was like, oh no, this is the end of the world. And I said that at the time. No, this is the most important thing. This is bad. Like, it doesn't, like, I'm not going to be able to change it. Like, I'm not saying like we all have to stop it. I wasn't like that. I was like, no, this is bad. And the outcome of this is going to determine a lot of other things. And then of course it did. But if you don't have the experience, you don't know that. But if you do have the experience and you say, no, guys, listen, I have the experience and this is the way it went down last time. Don't do that. And the people don't listen to you. Now we've got a problem, because it's a rejection of the wisdom, or the rejection of experience, or maybe a combination of both. And that, where we are suffering from that there's other things we're suffering from, but we're definitely suffering from that, where people they're not able, and fair enough, short attention spans, the whole 9 yards, this all plays into it. We're not able to see down the road anymore. And so people aren't seeing what's the next step. What's the third step from this? Because these things always lead to reliable patterns. So how did we get to a world where the presidential candidate is saying, I'm not a communist, I don't believe in communism, 1 week, and maybe it was less than a week, says, well, we need to implement price controls. Like, how did we get there? Because that pattern is inevitable, and it's been talked about over and over again that will happen. It's just nobody believed. They were like, no, you can split that baby. You can split that baby. You can't split that baby, guys. Certain things go together and can't be separated. And we're very much in this scientific, separate, categorize or miscategorize, name it yourself and all this other nonsense that doesn't work. And then we wonder why the world's falling apart. Well, because it's the structure to the world, and you have no choice. Like, I'm sorry.
Okay. There's a mechanic I've noticed online, which I've tried to single-handedly reverse, which is someone says something so incredibly stupid that nobody bothers to refute them, and they think they said something so incredibly smart that nobody can refute that.
They have no negative signal.
Yeah.
And we have a tendency to not want to give out negative signals. And sometimes we use the excuse that it's a small account, it's an insane statement, no one's going to believe it, so I'm not going to push back. And you'll notice if you follow me on Twitter, I don't do that. I don't push back on absolutely everything because that's impossible. But like, I do push back. I push back against, we'll say, some people that other people like, even when they say wrong things, and when they say right things. If you notice, I will support their right statements and back them up because I think that's important, right? Because you need the contrast to see. So if all I ever did was send out negative signals, I think that would be great. But it's not as good as also sending out positive signals so that you can tell the difference, because that's what I'm concerned with. Is contrast allows you to see. You can't see without contrast.
Well, that's my big thing about, like, I hope my praise when I do give it means something, because I don't praise people if I don't mean it. And when I think you're saying something stupid, I will say so.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's one of the things I think is super important about you in particular in your work is you have those qualities. And I think, disagreements aside, whatever they may or may not actually be, this is why I've always supported your work. Like, yeah, absolutely, Jacob has a good sense of good and evil, and when he says something, like, he actually means the things he says. And if he's unsure, he'll just say it, which is, to me, that, like, everything else it has no value. If people aren't willing to state their position up front and as clear as they can, maybe it's not clear to me because I'm a bit of an idiot about a bunch of things, fair enough, right? Then why are you listening to them? And if they can't tell you, oh, well, I'm not sure about this, or I wonder about this, or I have a question about this, then you get to be suspicious about those people. And we're not living in that world. And I don't know why, because I've always been that way. And I'm always like, maybe what, and I mean, this Cooper guy is the same thing. Like, surely Churchill did a lot of bad things that were wrong in some context, but the questions you're asking and you're framing is all wrong, because the real question is, should the UK have gotten involved, and should that battle timeline have been moved up and encouraged by Churchill? Because I can't answer those questions. Like, I'm not saying I have an answer. I'm saying he's not asking even the right questions. He's just axiomatically stating Churchill's no good and Hitler's no good. And I'm that's not good enough.
He called Churchill a psychopath.
But yeah, it's just clearly wrong. And yeah, we should push back on that.
It was just the obvious contradictions. Like, he's like, well, let's question this thing of, like, even if Uday Hussein, he was a 3-year-old child at one point, right?
Right.
The
trauma narrative
extends that zero to Winston Churchill.
Yeah, the trauma narrative, it's very modern framing, recent framing. I don't like the trauma framing. Everyone has trauma. Like, this is ridiculous. How do you discern a trauma that changes your life from a trauma that you subsequently integrate? Because that's the real question, right? Trauma is not harmful to you. It happens all the time. The thing that's harmful to you is not integrating your trauma, right? Or not having a way to integrate it. It's funny too, because it's right in Peterson. Like, he talks about that with the woman who thought she was abused by her brother, and then it turns out they were literal children, and, like, he didn't. Once the rationality goes away, it's like, well, that's not abuse. That's just kids playing and not knowing what the hell they're doing. And it's not great, but also it's not deliberate. And if it's not malice, it's easier to integrate. Sure, absolutely. I mean, sometimes things happen and we have zero control, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. See my wisdom talk with Jess, because of course he talked about Job, which is just exactly that story. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the world you have no knowledge of, no awareness of, and no control over, and you just have to get over that.
I agree.
Which is different from malice, which is real.
Malice is real. Malice does happen.
Yeah. Someone takes your house, that's malice, right? Someone steals your entire estate. These are malice. They're not malice. Everybody involved is involved in the malice. It's not that hard, right? But people don't want to believe in evil, so there's a way in which there's no way in which. That's nonsense.
They're just pursuing a lesser good, man.
Yeah, right. Right. That's or people just don't believe it, right? And it's like, I don't know, man. Court documents, certified, like stamped. Are you reading the same documents I'm reading? It's kind of clear as day. Like, no one's hiding the ball.
This has happened to me twice with intelligent people who I think seriously, like, so the governor of, I think, Governor Northam, was he the governor of North Carolina, or I forget which state he was. He was a governor, and like, there's that video of him talking about delivering a child and then deciding
Virginia.
whether or not to abort it. Okay,
Virginia. Yeah.
Northam was Virginia. Yeah. And so deciding whether or not to abort the child after it's born.
Yeah, I saw that interview.
Right? It's the video's right there. I have shown that video to two different people. They cannot believe what they are listening to.
Right.
They have told me, no, he's not saying that. And it's like,
it couldn't be more clear. He's saying exactly that.
It is absolutely clear. And these people they cannot face this reality.
They can't face it. Right. Well, and he pulled a psyop on everybody. And I actually got into an argument about that conversation a couple of years back with a friend of mine. And her point was that bill was never signed. And I said, all right, I don't live in Virginia. I live in South Carolina. I wasn't following that. I don't even know how the hell I tripped over that interview. Weird things happen. I normally wouldn't ever listen to anything like that. So I don't even know how I tripped over the interview. But in the interview, and I remember this clearly, he said, in a month, this bill is going to be on my desk and I'm going to sign it. And so the fact that it didn't happen is kind of irrelevant, right? It's a bit of a psyop because everybody who heard that believed that to be true and believed, or all the people that didn't like it certainly believed that the bill had passed. Because I mean,
whether or not the bill passes, like, he's telling you what he has experienced as a surgeon. Right. It doesn't matter whether it was legal. Like, he's telling you something that he is saying, I know exactly what happens. This is what happens. It's like,
right.
What is wrong with you?
Right. But also a bunch of people thought the bill had passed because he told them it was a certainty that it would pass. And then what happened was the bill didn't even get to his desk. And so it didn't pass. But no one knew that because how would you know unless you lived in Virginia and you were paying attention? And so a bunch of, the lefties all get up. So, well, the bill didn't even pass. And it's like, well, A, that's not the point. And B, like, how would anybody know that? The guy in the interview is sure the bill is going to get to his desk. And he told everybody he was going to sign it. I believed him. I didn't. There was no point at which I realized Virginia didn't pass the bill because he gave me the impression that it was a done deal. And so I was like, it's not fair to judge people because the bill didn't get passed. Also, not the point. Like, he would have passed it had it gotten to his desk. This is bad. He's still a bad person, even if he doesn't sign the damn bill because of other reasons. Like, it's horrible. The whole thing's horrible.
Yeah. Okay, it's getting late. I think I am going to end the stream.
It's been a pleasure, Jacob. Thank you for having me on. It's good to see you, Andrew.
Later.
Later.